Good evening and welcome to the Monday, November 6, 2023 business meeting of the Olympia City Council. For the record, we have a quorum with Councilmember Cooper remote tonight. At the beginning of our agenda, we have announcements, and so I'm going to turn it over to our City Manager, Jay Burney, to make a big announcement.
Good evening, council members. Thank you again. For the record, Jay Burney, City Manager. I am excited to be here tonight to introduce our new fire chief, Matt Morris. After a nationwide search, Chief Morris rose to the top, and he is absolutely the chief we need to move our department into the future. Chief Morris comes to us with 33 years of fire experience. He comes to us most recently as the former chief of the Puget Sound Regional Fire Authority. He brings a broad fire service experience background and strong business and strategic planning as well. I am thrilled to welcome him to his new role at the City of Olympia, so please help me welcome our new chief, Matt Morris.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to say thank you so much for the opportunity to join you tonight and just introduce myself. I am thrilled and excited to be here. It's an absolute privilege to have been selected. I appreciate the City Manager's confidence, and I'm really looking forward to getting started. Today was day one, so we're just getting started, so I'm very excited. It's an amazing organization. The city and the fire department are just fantastic, so I'm just honored to be here. I'm more than happy to take any questions or answer anything you may have for me.
I just want to welcome you to the city. It's a pretty special organization, and the culture that we've created from the top down, the bottom up, is, I think, pretty remarkable, and I hope you find this to be a great home for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Agreed.
Anybody? Councilmember Madrone?
Yeah, I also wanted to welcome you. I've heard great things, and I know that the folks at the fire department are really excited to welcome you as well. And I'd love to grab a cup of coffee sometime.
That'd be fantastic. I would love that. Yeah, thank you.
All right, Councilmember Parsley.
I've already met you.
Absolutely.
I wanted to welcome you and also offer a cup of coffee, but more importantly, let you know that when I was watching you interact with the firefighters that luncheon, what struck me was you were listening. And it wasn't just perfunctory, you were listening. And you were engaging them in their opinions, which I think is super important for the future of our fire department. And you also had a lot of great ideas for the next 5 to 10 years. So I look forward to this.
Thank you very much.
All right, we good?
Awesome.
Thank you so much. And I heard you're going to spend the rest of the evening watching our meeting.
I'm going to, absolutely. Wouldn't miss it.
It's riveting stuff, let me tell you. Thank you. All right. At this time is when we approve tonight's agenda, and I need to make a small amendment. Under special recognition, we are going to be adding a tribute to former Mayor Bill Daley. With that, I need a motion to approve.
So move the amended agenda.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda is set. So we are going to go now to special recognition, and I will read a brief statement and then invite some of his friends and family up to speak regarding his impact. So Olympia lost a great leader recently, and I'd like to give time this evening to acknowledge the life of former Olympia Mayor Bill Daley. His family and friends shared some memories with me, and I've chosen a few excerpts to share now. I'll also be calling up a few of these people to share more stories after me, and there are a lot of stories. It's notable that we recently paid tribute to another former council member, Gil Carboni, and ironically, they served together for many years and were both involved in the ballot measure that changed the governance model of the city from a commissioner-led government to the council-manager form that we have today. Bill was first elected in 1982 to the council and quickly became known for always thinking about the big picture and acting strategically. His vision for Olympia's downtown laid the foundation for our historic Main Street to be revitalized in the 80s. This vision, including turning Olympia's orientation to its waterfront with Percival Landing, making downtown a gathering place with the Washington Center, the Olympia Center, and a farmer's market inspired by his visits to farmers markets on his foreign travels. He was a generous leader and shared credit for successful projects with his council mates and staff. Bill's power of persuasion, honed as a legislative lobbyist, gathered community support for these projects that define downtown even to this day. Bill also saw the arts as an important part of the downtown revitalization. He hosted meetings of artists and art promoters to brainstorm ideas. This group formulated a proposal for an arts commission. The city council adopted it, and the arts commission became the first in the county, and it's still the only arts commission in the county. And they were responsible for the first pieces of public art purchased by the city and the concept of Arts Walk, which again, we enjoy to this day. On a personal note, I first met Bill when he came to public comment back in 2016 and lobbied council to renew our sister city relationship with ancient Olympia Grace. I met with him to discuss the history of that relationship and spent the better part of an hour hearing stories about Greek politics, going back to, the first days, and the Olympia torch lighting ceremony. He would always check in with me before he went back to Greece, and he always made a stop in ancient Olympia, so our Olympia stayed on their radar. So with that, I am going to call forward, I know several of you have signed up on the public comment sheet, so I'll probably start with that, and I'll start with Al Ralston.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. For the record, my name is Al Ralston. I'm a resident of Renton, Washington, but I've, how shall I put it, carried on for over 50 years here in Olympia in one form or another, owning or renting property while I've worked up on the Hill. Bill was a very dear friend of mine from the very beginning of my career. I should say, incidentally, that this, I think, is the first time I've ever been recognized before Senator Sam Hunt to be able to testify on anything. So, Sam, I'm enjoying this. First of all, there's two parts to Bill Daley that I want to bring to your attention that you may not know very much about, and these are very external things from being the mayor of Olympia. The first is his involvement as the government affairs person and spokesperson for the then superintendent of public instruction, Buster Brulette. I had the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. for a client one time when I was very new to my career. Bill was back there, and he was able to guide me around the Capitol for my first time, and I will never, ever forget it. He was well known back there with our delegation. And I don't know quite how to put it, but I'd had kind of an activity or an issue that had happened in Seattle before my trip, had told Bill about it, and we had a big laugh about it. And as I was trying to get in to see members of Congress, I got a call from then Senator Magnuson's office that the senator wanted to see me. Here I was about a 25-year-old newbie to Washington, D.C., and to have the senator of the very powerful budget committee wanting to meet me, I was honored, and it gave me the opportunity to lobby for the project that I was working on. And in the room were Featherstone Reed, one of his key staff people who came out here many years later to work in the Washington State Senate Ways and Means Committee, and a guy by the name of he was the House member from up in the Tacoma area for many years. But Bill taught me a lot about how to navigate through Washington, D.C., and the issue that I told him about, which was kind of a joke, Magnuson wanted to meet the guy who had actually had the nerve to do whatever it was that I had done, and it'll be in a book that I write sometime, and so I won't bore you with the details now, but Magnuson found it so funny he wanted to meet that guy that did that. And so that's how that happened. And then Bill and I became very, very good friends. And very briefly, I want to tell you the importance of the sister city arrangement. I was one of the people that went on that trip with Marta was the president of the Sister City Association, Marta Fowler. And I got cajoled in it. I wasn't living in Olympia at the time, but Bill Daley wanted someone from the business community to join the trip. I was representing the Boeing company at the time up on the Hill, and he thought it would be a good idea to have a big business type to be able to go on this particular trip. We went, and my good friend Dwayne Slade, who may or may not testify remotely, he's got some testimony he wants to submit and have me read, which I'm not going to do because it's fairly lengthy, but we'll get it into the record somehow. Dwayne and I, after we arrived in Olympia, we walked into town from the little hotel we were staying at about a kilometer outside of town. We were standing on the main street and looking around. This is where we were going to be for the next couple days. And the shopkeeper came out in English, said, "Hi, where are you guys from?" And we said, "Well, we're from Olympia, Washington." And the shopkeeper, he had a jewelry store, it's still there, ran up and down the street yelling, "They're here, they're here. Bill Daly's here, Bill Daly, Bill Daly." Everything was Bill Daly, and it was wonderful. As we left town after the trip, we were heading back in the bus from the remainder of our tour of Greece before we flew back home. There was a series of graffitis and signs painted on a wall just outside the city of Olympia in red paint. It was all in Greek, but it was dramatic. And I asked someone on the bus, one of our interpreters, if they could tell us what it said. And they didn't want to. But they finally did. It was all anti-American slogans and statements. The mayor of Olympia, Greece at the time, was a strong, socialist, anti-American mayor. But because it was Olympia, Washington, with the sister city arrangement with Olympia, Greece, diplomacy prevailed, and we were welcomed with open arms. We never had to pay for a thing the 3 or 4 days we were in town, and it was all because of Bill Daly, the diplomat in the Corps. Anyway, I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity and to give you at least a little feel from my external perspective about the importance Bill Daly was to this community outside of the farmers market, outside of the other things that he did in helping with the form of government that you have. But thank you very much, and I'll leave it up to Dwayne Slade, who is the president of the school board, to outline his statements to you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very, very much. We are now, is Dwayne Slate available? Okay. This is really awkward, but we have a limited amount of time to get through all these people. And so I would just appreciate if something's already been mentioned that maybe we don't need to mention it. This is awkward, but we have a long business meeting tonight too, so I just want to be respectful of staff. All right, Dwayne? Yes.
Dwayne's traveling.
All right, we can see you, Mr. Slate, but you're muted. Do you know how to turn on your audio? That's classic. Yeah, there we are.
Am I on now?
Yes, you are.
Oh, jeez. Well, Ralston just stole all my thunder. I just wanted to be on here for a moment to let you know what a good guy Bill Daly was. He did a lot of nice things as mayor, and he was a wonderful mentor to me as an education lobbyist and later an education elected official on the school board. But as Al said, the effect that Bill had on the people over in Olympia, Greece, led me to understand that he was a little bit better than just a good buddy of mine. He was really good at what he did. Sherry and I, my wife and I, went back to Olympia, Greece, 15, 20 years later. And when they found out that we were part of that sister city exchange, our money was no good. We got free desserts and all that kind of stuff. But Bill was such an inspirational guy. It's hard to get across to people the effect that he had on folks. When he would call up and say, I got this idea and we can do this. It was both assurance and motivational at the same time. But he was so much fun, the guy was. He was a big man. His life was big. He worked hard and he played hard. really loved this city. And he loved people. That's why he was in politics. He wasn't really a good politician, but he was a political man. Just a quick story. I'm sorry, Mayor, I'll make this brief. And by the way, I noticed that you and your daughter had a nice experience over in Olympia, Greece recently too. So you're not hearing anything new about the Greek people and how they have an affection and remembrance of Bill Daley. But let's see, what was I starting to say, Sherry? Yeah, whenever Bill and I would be playing around together, we played golf together once. He got a hole in one, and it was unbelievable because he was the world's worst golfer. So I called the Olympian and told them that I was out golfing with the mayor when he got a hole in one, and they used my name in the newspaper story more often than his. As a school board president, I was really pleased with that because I got more publicity out of it than he did. But when we would listen to some songs, Jimmy Buffett used to sing a song that had a line in it about if we weren't all crazy, we would go insane. Now, as an Irishman, Bill knew that there was a really fine line between genius and insanity. And I'm not sure that he was either one, but I wouldn't be surprised at either. He was just a marvelously wonderful man who cared about the city, and his travels around the world were to find out how to help make Olympia a more welcoming and growing and thriving city by virtue of the travels that he did. So, Madam Mayor, I wanted to thank you for this opportunity to have a little remembrance of this guy. There are too many people in this town who didn't get to know Bill, and they're the worst for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next, I would like to invite forward Sam Hunt.
I recently had back surgery, so I'm recuperating, but it shows that some politicians do have a backbone, so. Bad joke. I'm sorry, I am Sam Hunt, and I've been a longtime friend of Bill's. I met Bill in 1977 when he worked for Buster Brulette, when I came to Olympia to work for Buster Brulette as Superintendent of Public Instruction. Shortly after that, Bill moved to DC to handle federal relations for Buster and for the state of Washington for education, and a year after that, I moved to DC to work for Senator Magnuson doing education appropriations. So we crossed paths numerous times and managed to scheme on just a few things for education. I will not go into them, but one of the things, my wife Charlene and I became good friends with Bill, not only politically and professionally, but socially, and had fundraisers at his place, and we partied together, and that's one place I learned the difference between Irish Catholic whiskey and Irish Protestant whiskey. Daley would not drink that Protestant stuff. It was Jameson. It was all about Northern Ireland and Catholics and Protestants. And a few years later, Bill and I were walking out of the Dirksen Senate office building one night, and he said he'd met a wonderful woman who worked for Senator Cranston of California. Thus, Ann and his life and ours all merged, and we became longtime friends. So I knew them when they were in DC. I knew them when they were in Olympia. And Bill and Ann returned to Olympia about a year later, and when we moved back. And Bill and Ann had a big house on Capitol Hill in the South Capitol neighborhood, not far from where the mayor lives. And that became a social gathering spot for parties, for special guests, for political fundraisers, Democratic fundraisers. I think I had my first fundraiser there when I ran for office, and I have a lovely picture of the Hunt Miller family, my wife and all of her brothers and sisters and nieces and nephews, that we took on that back deck at Bill's house one summer. So there's an ongoing memory of Bill Daley and his impact on us. And then when Bill and Ann's daughters, Erin and Laura, needed childcare, my wife provided that for about 2 years. And one of the highlights of that was when Erin and Laura got a hold of Char's bright red fingernail polish and went in the basement and painted themselves. Neither Ann or Bill were available at that day. They were both in meetings. So we had an interesting trip. Char did to buy fingernail polish remover at the store so she could take care of that. Sorry, Aaron, shouldn't have told that. Then Bill ran for mayor of Olympia. You've heard all of his accomplishments and things, the Olympia Center and Farmers Market. And he was truly a leader and out front, willing to make the risk, to be a leader, to make sure that Olympia prospered and grew. He also challenged the incumbent Thurston County Commissioner, lost a close race. That's another story we could tell. But, and then after that, he spent many years lobbying the legislature and working on causes in and around Olympia, you know, for what we call the white hats and the education lobbyists. He was, in my view, always on the right side of issues, and certainly had a huge impact on the community. And he leaves a legacy and an imprint on Olympia area that we should all be thankful for. And I just appreciate all the time that I had to know Bill Daly and to work with him, and thank you for the time.
Thank you. This is all just so lovely. We've got a few more people. I am going to invite forward Marta Fowler, followed by Karen Fraser.
Good evening, Mayor Selby and council members. I'm Marta Fowler, and I lost my notes, so I'll wing it. Bill Daly was a dear friend and mentor to me, and I have known him since I was 19 years old, about 5 years ago. And we did many, many projects together, campaigns. He and Ann embraced me. I was young, so I had dinner at their house many, many times. And so over the years, we had many projects. And Bill, if you knew him, he was a force of nature. He would get an idea in his head, and he would go with it, and he would gather people together. He was a unifier, a terrific guy. He called me one day and said, hey, I'm trying to put together this sister city with Olympia, Greece, and Olympia, Washington, and wouldn't it be perfect, the culture exchange, and we'll go over there and then have the mayor come over here. Would you like to be on the committee? And I was like, well, okay, I guess so. I'm not Greek or anything. He goes, that's okay, who cares? And so I did it, and I became president. And then we pulled it all together, and we got a sister city agreement together, and we went over there, and the contingency that you see here, some of us, we had a fabulous time. Bill and I were the official city officials and gave speeches, but it really was amazing how Bill could unify everyone and bring people of all walks of life together to achieve a goal, and he was fascinating. He was a history buff. He was amazing. I can't say enough good about him, and I would say I learned a lot from him, and thank you for the opportunity to talk.
Thank you. And former Senator Karen Fraser.
Well, thank you, and good evening, Mayor, City Council members. It's nice to see you all here in person. I'm here tonight to honor Bill Daly, and my husband, Tim Malone, and I were good friends with him and did a lot of things together. I admired his intellect, his broad perspective, and his public service commitment, which you've heard a lot about here tonight. My favorite actions of his as mayor were, one, the bond measure for the farmers market failed. So no money for the farmers market. But Bill said, we're going to do it anyway. And we did. You did. The council did. And it's one of the highlights of the city. So that's an example of his vision and determination. And the other was his work on the sister city with Greece. I really think sister cities are part of the building blocks of world peace. So I encourage you to continue that effort. And I continue to admire and appreciate Bill Daly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, I have Holly Gadbaugh, followed by Aaron Daly.
Yeah, thank you for honoring Bill, because Bill is really one of the most significant leaders that Olympia had. This has been a really tough month for me since of the original council, we're down to two, me and Pete Canettle. We lost Gil Carboni this month too. So, but both of these men were really important because they were very instrumental, along with the League of Women Voters, in changing the government. And I think many of you probably would not be sitting here today if that had not happened. Before Olympia was, except with the exception of Amanda Smith, there were no women, no people of color, no LGBTQ people on the council. The first council had 3 women and no state employees. And so Bill was really the first state employee. He was a commissioner, a transitional figure, and then he was on the council. So he was really instrumental for the foundation of downtown revitalization. Although downtown revitalization is never done, he and that first council, but Bill was the leader, Bill had the vision, and if I ever had a political mentor, it was Bill. He showed me how important it was to build relationships with other council members, to be respectful of staff, and have a vision, and know what your vision is, and know what your values are, and make decisions based on those values. It's really nice to see Al Ralston, because I'm sure Al doesn't remember me, but when Bill had a fundraiser, I donated a parking place in my driveway to the fundraiser. Now, that would probably be illegal today under the current city.
The SCNA would not like that.
Under current city council or current city ordinances. But I donated that place, and Al bought it. I live a block from the Capitol, and so we always were having problems with parking in the South Capitol neighborhood.
Some things never change.
Particularly with lobbyists. So this was, so I donated this, and luckily a lobbyist bought it. And Al parked there for that session. Also, my only connection to the trip to Greece was Bill. We had a council retreat, and Bill was going from the council retreat directly to Greece. Bill didn't have any toothpaste, and I had a little tiny, almost used up a toothpaste. And he asked me if I had any toothpaste, so I gave him this used up toothpaste, and he said, "Oh, that will get me to Greece and back." So anyway, it's when somebody passes, you always hope that they know how much you appreciated what they did, and how they helped you. So I hope, that's my hope, that Bill knew.
Oh, my goodness. All right. So last we have Aaron Daly. Or a representative?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm Julia Gordon. I am Erin's best friend, and if you know Erin, you know that public speaking is her worst nightmare. So she did ask me to make a few comments on behalf of Bill, and just really thank everyone for their very touching comments. In addition to everything, sorry, I'm going to just take a quick second because now this is my greatest fear, crying in public. Okay. In addition to all of the things that were mentioned here today, Aaron really wanted you all to know that he was an even greater father. He was very dedicated to his two daughters, Erin and Lara, and then even extended that to Jean and Marty Regal, who also considered him a father. His grandchildren, Alyssa, Kobe, James, Jet, Eva. Did I miss any? Okay, great. He was just a fantastic father figure. If you can just imagine the hell that young teenagers caused him in the streets of Olympia and all of the great memories that we have, he was just a really outstanding person. But all of the comments that have already been mentioned about what a great public servant he was, what a great visionary, he put an exponential amount of time and effort into being a father and caring for his family. So again, thank you on behalf of Erin and the family. This was really touching and important for us to hear. Thanks.
Thank you very, very much for coming down this evening in this weather to pay tribute to a pretty amazing person that I wish we all had more of a chance to get to know. Any other comments from the dais? Mayor Pro Tem Gilman.
I just want to very briefly add that all of this great description of Bill as a mover and shaker, I also knew him as somebody who stood still and stood by folks. And it was really significant to me in the Worthy Wages for Childcare organizing. It was late 80s, I believe, that there was this guy in a London Fog trench coat standing alongside all of us scruffy folks advocating for fair treatment of childcare workers at Sylvester Park as we were organizing. And it just felt like one meeting after another, sort of that energy around the children's initiative, right? Just carried on to standing alongside wanting the best for children and families. And I'm really grateful for that, and I considered that important mentoring. So.
Thank you. Touched a lot of lives for a lot of decades. So I think we're going to move on to public comment now, and thanks again, and be safe. So tonight's public comment, we have several people signed up for remote comments, and then one person in chambers. So I'll start with the one in chambers. And for those of you that might not have spoken to us for public comment, you have 2 minutes. There's a countdown clock in chambers over my right shoulder. As you can see the 2 minutes, you get a 30-second warning. And then if you are giving comments remotely, there is a timer that's on the Zoom screen that will help you. So I'm going to start with Emily McHugh.
Hello, everyone. My name is Emily McHugh. I'm an artist in Olympia. I'm here to urge this council to pass a resolution calling for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. I think it's important that at all levels of government we be putting pressure on the next level. I know city government level, there's, but I'm just here to express concern as a citizen, and that there is precedent in other cities for resolutions like this. Now, Detroit is voting on one. Redmond, California has passed one at the city government level to make our position clear. We're witnessing a genocide. And so I'm just here to say that, and appreciate all of your time.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to our remote participants. We'll start with John Saunders, followed by Karen Mesmer.
John is traveling.
Yes. Hello, this is John Saunders. I'm currently serving as the president of the South Capitol Neighborhood Association. We would just like to speak briefly tonight, strongly supporting the proposed increase in the sales tax for transportation projects. But we urge you to please prioritize improvements of existing sidewalks and building new sidewalks in the city with these new funds. For people who use wheelchairs, canes, walkers, the absence of sidewalks or sidewalks in poor condition are an enormous barrier to just getting around. And we know that in the South Capitol neighborhood alone, there are many, many sidewalks that are really desperately in need of improvement and repair. If the city truly intends to combat climate change by encouraging residents to use other forms of transportation, such as transit and walking, then committing funds to improving sidewalks is the best way to do it, in our opinion. And thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight.
Thank you. Just to clarify, the online timer should be 2 minutes? Yeah. All right. Thank you. Next, we have Karen Mesmer, followed by Aiden Wasson.
Karen is traveling.
Good evening, council members. I want to thank you, Mayor Selby and council members, for listening to the Planning Commission, the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, neighborhoods, and the public. This evening, you'll be discussing the potential to raise the Transportation Benefit District tax to make our community safer for people who walk and bicycle. This is a really important step in implementing the Climate Action Plan, the Transportation Master Plan, and really the comprehensive plan goals that we've had for a long time about active transportation. This is important for our physical and our mental health, for people of all ages. Walking is a healthy form of exercise, but it's actually a lot more than that. When people walk, we see each other face to face. We engage with each other, and we get to know our neighbors when we walk. You can't get that from driving in a car. You just can't. So when this tax was brought up a little earlier, a few months ago, active transportation was not as strongly represented in the recommended expenditures for this fund. And you have listened to the community. The current proposal uses the funding in such a way that it's much more responsive to what people have been asking for. So I really want to thank you for moving forward, I hope, to support healthy and active transportation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Aiden Wasson, followed by Larry Jezza.
Aiden is traveling.
Hi, my name is Aiden Wasson. I'm a school bus driver in training, a public policy grad student at Evergreen State. I want to vocalize some opinion on the the LAHI project. I have admiration for the reduced physical footprint and surface area. That makes it more efficient than tiny homes of similar unit size. I think that's a great change. And I also admire your partnership with a nonprofit that was able to put almost 95% of its expenses towards the program as of 2021. That said, I would like to understand why the land that the county spent over $800,000 acquiring is being reprivatized. Many studies, both old and new, have shown that the privatization of housing increases housing costs, reduces housing mobility, their ability to transition between homes, and increases poverty. I can provide you with numerous scholarly sources that support this. So I want to know why it is necessary to privatize this new housing by gifting it to LIHI for $1 instead of making it public housing, knowing that the latter is more cost effective and beneficial for housing transitions. Since I've got a bit of time left, I would also like to vocalize my support for calling for a ceasefire in Gaza as well.
Thank you. Next, we have Larry Jezza, followed by Paul Segura.
Okay, can you hear me? Great. Okay, first of all, I want to thank you for the acknowledgement of Bill Daley and his contribution to Olympia. I was really moved by those speakers tonight. I really was. My name's Larry Jezza, and I'm speaking tonight as the chair of the Olympia Council of Neighborhood Associations. I want to thank the City Council for the direction to staff regarding the use of funds from the potential adoption of the transportation benefit sales tax. We support focusing the increased revenues on transportation elements beyond roads and including new sidewalks and sidewalk repairs, which has long been a priority for neighborhoods. Unlike roads for cars, sidewalks are the human scale transportation element that ties a community together. Unlike roads, they are enablers, not separators, of person-to-person engagement that's essential to building stronger neighborhood connections. From an environmental perspective, sidewalks are an essential element for viable transit alternatives. We support providing significant funding for maintaining the existing sidewalk investments, particularly where the deteriorated condition of the sidewalk results in the inability of people, especially those relying on assistive devices, to travel safely. And we are pleased by the staff recommendation for a fair, more effective, and more equitable approach to funding sidewalk maintenance. We also recognize that the funding gap will still be significant, and that is why we support hiring an additional staff person to provide the capacity to apply for sidewalk grant opportunities that are expected to be coming from the federal and state governments. Again, I thank the council for supporting this attention to sidewalks and other alternatives for a more livable and sustainable Olympia. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Paul Segura, and then Jim Lazar is our last speaker tonight.
Paul is not currently signed up.
All right, we'll go to Jim Lazar.
Jim is traveling.
Good evening. I'm speaking about agenda item 6B. I worked hard on funding for non-motorized transportation in decades past. We got a lot of good work done, but some things didn't go according to plan. First, construction costs have risen faster than inflation. Second, the utility tax revenue has not risen as fast as inflation. Third, the 2005 stormwater manual improvements requires much more aggressive stormwater management and has doubled the cost of a lot of sidewalk projects. Fourth, the council stopped providing about $250,000 a year of general fund money to non-motorized transportation during the 2009 financial crisis, and that was not restored. We have a climate emergency. Non-motorized transportation helps people move around our community without emitting greenhouse gases. They also improve equity, helping people for whom cars and parking are financial burdens. I support this and urge you to move ahead in this budget process with adoption of the additional TBD funding. On another note, I will miss Bill Daley. Bill was a friend of mine. I worked with his wife Ann at the legislature. I was his yard sign boy in his first campaign. The original Bicycle Advisory Committee was created during his time in office, now the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. Bill contributed to this community in many, many, many different ways, and I'm glad to have known him. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. All right. Are there any questions for staff or comments from the dais regarding our public commenters this evening? Councilmember Madrone?
Yeah, I was wondering if staff could speak to the question around the Lehigh project.
Yeah, go ahead, Jacinda.
I think now, because they're watching and it's a timely response.
Jacinda Stelchis for the record, Affordable Housing Program Manager. So in regard to the comment, I believe, I hope I'm not pronouncing the name incorrectly, Aiden Wasson. So just a little bit of background. The question was why the privatizing housing through partnering with Lehigh. So we put out a solicitation, the city, put out a solicitation seeking a development team to develop that property because that is not a skill set that the city has in constructing or managing. Lehigh was selected, Low Income Housing Institute, and a real estate purchase and sale agreement was executed. Within that purchase and sale agreement, it was a $1 sale and a in perpetuity clause that housing would be used in perpetuity for low income housing, specifically permanent supportive housing for households and individuals, again, earning 50% or below area median income. So I don't know if that completely answers the question. Okay.
Yeah, I think it does. Thank you.
And I guess I can also extend the invitation. I'm sure, my contact number probably isn't published I don't have a slide this afternoon, but my cell, 360-790-5224. I'm happy to have a further conversation if there's any more questions or confusion.
Thank you for that. I have Councilmember Parsley.
Thank you to all the public commenters, especially the support for the sales tax, because being on finance and trying to find a way through to getting even a fourth, much less an eighth of our planned projects for the traffic master plan. Transportation, I said that looking at Councilmember Madrone purposely. We're just not going to get anywhere with our $40 tab, so I appreciate that. I would be for a ceasefire resolution. I'll just leave it at that. There's a lot of harm being done, and it would be nice just to be able to say this should stop so we can see if we can get talks going.
All right. What I would like is for Councilmember Payne.
Yes, I just felt that this was the appropriate opportunity to do this. I was actually wondering if we would see any of our downtown business owners or employees come speak tonight regarding this weekend. And for those of you who may not know what I'm speaking about, there was a rally for freeing Palestine on Saturday here in Olympia, and it was attended by a large number of people, and understandably so. But with that, I saw a lot of property destruction and damage in our community. And we've seen that before with other movements that have come into our community. And it seems to always get hijacked by people who want to send these types of messages to people in our community. But I have a message for those people. Your behavior is not welcome here. I apologize on behalf of myself as a leader in this community for the business owners who have to spend more of their time and their money fixing defaced property. Because this is all it does, is it takes more time and money away from the people who invest in this community. And frankly, it does not free Palestine.
Thank you for that. We do have a history of really well-meaning movements coming through, well-attended because we're the state capital, and they're honestly, sincerely trying to raise awareness about certain policies here and abroad. And like Councilmember Payne said, unfortunately, other people look at that as a chance to exploit the crowd and cause damage. And what I've asked before is if that's happening while you're out being part of a demonstration, that you do whatever you can to discourage that type of behavior, because it does not reflect well on the cause. And all these causes are important. So whether that's going to land anywhere, but it's unfortunately all too common in Olympia. So, Councilmember Nguyen.
Yeah, thanks. Just wanted to respond to some of our public commenters tonight. I really appreciate everyone coming and public commenting, and then even weaving in your own experiences with Bill Daley, so that's really heartwarming. and for what it's worth, if you believe that he can see all of this right now and feel it, his spirit being kept alive, then I believe that it's true. I love seeing folks that usually come to public comment and give us constructive feedback about what we could be doing to improve our city planning processes. To also take the time to come back and tell us when they feel like maybe we're headed on the right track. So really appreciate that, Karen, Larry, and then double Larry. With a little bit of constructive feedback as well. So I appreciate that. I think that's really lovely to have folks that are so tuned in and involved. And then picking up there are 2 public comments about calling for a ceasefire. I just wanted to let you know, thank you for coming here tonight, and thank you for your passion and for your advocacy. And I will work with my colleagues to look into what some of those precedented cities have done and what that resolution looks like and what could make sense for our city, knowing that there is a lot of harm happening to both sides. And so what makes sense, and definitely a ceasefire and nonviolence makes sense to me. So. And knowing that this is how can we show our Olympia values and stand up for what we believe to be true, and even at this very local, small level of government, while acknowledging that this is, this history has been rooted in a long, long time of going back and forth and sides, and so looking into what makes sense. And I appreciate you being here tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, I think we're going to move on. I need a motion to approve tonight's consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions, comments, or polls? I hadn't heard any before tonight, so nothing. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent calendar is approved. And thanks to Jacinda for item 4B. It's a big packet of work, so thank you. That takes us on to item 6A. We have 2 items under other business this evening. The first is a briefing on the Capitol Mall Triangle sub-area planning. And so it's, we're going to invite forward David Ginther, who is a senior planner at Community Planning and Development.
Thank you very much. And with me tonight, I've brought senior planner Michelle Swanson from Public Works Transportation. She'll be helping out with the presentation as well. All right, this is a briefing on the Capitol Mall Triangle Sub-Area Plan and Planned Action Environmental Impact Statement. I won't be using that full term for it throughout this presentation. I'll be shortening it substantially for you. And I'll explaining what all of that stands for, the Planned Action, the EIS, the Environmental Impact Statement, and the Sub-Area Plan. All right. This project has a very primary goal, and it's laid out in the existing adopted comprehensive plan for the city. The goal, though, is to help implement what the vision is that already exists within the comprehensive plan. There is a lot of guidance in the comprehensive plan for this. I've taken 2 of the best quotes for this and put them right here. The first one, it's twofold for this project. First one is to eventually transition gradually into a complete urban neighborhood where people can live, work, shop, and get things that they need to, all without needing to rely heavily on personal vehicles. The second part is recognizing the importance of this Capitol Mall area in regards to the business community and the city overall. It is a regional draw. People come from quite a ways away to go to this area for shopping. It's very important to the city as well as the community. So twofold goals there. Okay. The project area we're talking about, obviously, it's around the Capitol Mall. But it is a larger area. We're looking at the area between Cooper Point Road, Black Lake Boulevard, and then north of Harrison about 1 to 2 blocks, and it follows a high density or intense zone district boundaries and stays out of the lower intensity residential areas. I do have some statistics for this area, just to get you a little bit more acquainted with it. roughly 300 acres in size. The mall is the major property owner there with 88 acres right in the center. There are 4 major property owners, including the mall. There are quite a few property owners out there, but 4 of them have the largest amount of acreage in the area. Second, it would be the Target Place ownership. Third is the Wig Properties, which is where the Goodwill and the Ace Hardware are on the northwest corner there. And then at the very south end is another property owner where the Five Guys and the Nordstrom Rack are located. So those are the 4 major ones. We've talked with many other ones as well, but we're keeping in touch with as many of the businesses and property owners as we can throughout the process. All right. This project, the city was fortunate enough to get a grant from the Washington State Department of Commerce for $250,000. The grant is titled a Transit-Oriented Development Implementation Grant. Basically, it is exactly what was mentioned in the comprehensive plan about planning for an urban neighborhood with alternative means of transportation available for people, including transit. This grant does end up requiring us to complete a sub-area plan, the environmental impact statement, and to go along with that, the environmental impact statement will be supplemented with a planned action ordinance as well, and I'll explain what those are in just a moment. Okay, so the 3 main project components. Sub-area plan, some of you may be familiar with this and some are not. The city has a comprehensive plan which guides the city overall, citywide for all of the city functions. There is a portion of that deals with land use and neighborhood planning. A sub-area plan is a focus on a smaller geographic area. It is a 20-year land use plan, has the vision, goals, and any recommended actions to implement and reach that vision. The environmental impact statement, which is often abbreviated EIS, that one is a very narrow focus. It concentrates on significant adverse environmental impacts. So it'll evaluate potential actions, potential development scenarios for the area, and evaluate if those have significant impacts. The last thing is a planned action ordinance, which will come after the sub-area plan and environmental impact statement. And that one will identify any mitigation measures if they are needed. It'll identify what those are. And along with that, we will likely have we will potentially have some code amendments that go along with this process to help implement the plan. All right. We have gotten great community feedback all through this process. We have hundreds of comments and written comments. We've had many, many meetings and briefings and presentations for the public and the community. I have boiled that down to fit on one page, which is very difficult. There is a lot of information, a lot of public input. So please keep in mind I had to fit it on one page here. So there was a lot behind each one of these bullet points. And for neighborhood planning, the thing we heard the most was people are very supportive of a complete urban neighborhood in the mall vicinity, in the Capitol Mall area. That would be complete with all sorts of public spaces and community amenities that you would expect within an urban neighborhood. Climate was very important to the public and the community. They'd like to see responsible building practices and a sustainable, climate-friendly community. And lastly, transportation, not least by any means. This one is definitely up there with concerns from the public. The main thing that we heard from the community was they want safer and they want more opportunities for multimodal transportation. So more opportunities that are safer for biking, walking, and rolling, as well as great opportunities for transit. Senior Planner Michelle Swanson will be taking over the next several slides on transportation.
Great. Thank you so much, David. As David said, I'm here to talk about in greater detail about the transportation element of this project. As a reminder, the purpose of the project is to implement the vision in our comprehensive plan of a more complete urban neighborhood. The comprehensive plan, I'm going to call it the comp plan, also states that Olympia's vision for the future transportation system is one of complete streets that move people, not just cars. The vision There are also several transportation policies in the comprehensive plan that help guide this work, including one goal to make it easier to walk, bike, and ride the bus so that land use densities can increase without creating more traffic congestion. The biggest transportation challenge with this project is retrofitting a very auto-oriented place to be more supportive of walking, biking, and transit. This is consistent with another long-standing policy described not only in our own comprehensive plan, but also the regional transportation plan. Both plans have designated the 3 streets that define this area as strategy corridors. So those are Harrison Avenue, Cooper Point Road, and Black Lake Boulevard. Strategy corridors are streets where widening is not a preferred option. Instead, we work to maintain mobility by making it easier to walk, bike, or take transit. And that is also one of the ways that we work to manage congestion. Another way we manage congestion is to build roundabouts and a well-connected street grid. Roundabouts increase efficiency and safety at intersections, and a well-connected street grid helps disperse traffic among many other benefits. One goal of this project is to create a higher degree of predictability for developers so that we will see the type of development in this area that is consistent with that vision in the comprehensive plan. So one of the ways we'll do that is by requiring less transportation analysis with new projects in the area. And one of the tools that will allow us to do that is called a trip cap. The trip cap sets the maximum number of vehicle trips for this area at what it would be if the area were built out to what it is zoned for today. So this serves as a safety valve in the sense that if we get an unpredicted amount of growth in the area, we can go back to requiring that higher level of transportation analysis with new projects. Currently, the Mall Triangle is characterized by those 3 strategy corridors that I just mentioned, and they are big, busy streets. So that's Harrison Avenue there in the north, Cooper Point on the west, and Black Lake Boulevard on the east. And then the smaller Capitol Mall Drive bisects the area running east and west. Because there are so few connected public streets in the area, traffic gets concentrated on these 4 streets. This leads to congestion, which is frustrating for drivers, and it is challenging for transit. And it makes these streets unpleasant places to walk or bike, even where there are sidewalks and bike lanes, because of the noise, the pollution, and the threat from busy and often fast-moving traffic. When we compare this area to downtown, which is shown on the right at the same scale, and you can see the scale bar in each of those maps, you can also see the striking contrast in the street system. Downtown was laid out before the era of the automobile. The street density is much greater, and that makes it a more inviting place to walk or bike. It's also easier for transit to serve downtown, not only because people have shorter distances to walk to get to the bus stop, but also because the street density makes it easier for the buses to turn around. Not having places to turn around is a major barrier to transit service on the west side. And in fact, intercity transit has told us that the lack of public streets on the west side makes it very challenging to serve. This is why requiring street connections with redevelopment is so crucial in this area. It is in the comprehensive plan where we show planned street connections, but right now we only show one in the Mall Triangle area, and that's in the northeast corner of the study area, and it connects Harrison to 4th Avenue. Defining essential street connections within the Mall Triangle will be a crucial outcome of this project. Having a map of them makes it easier for us to require that they be built with new development. So far, we've defined these essential street connections on this map that is included in the draft subarea plan. These are still pretty far apart when compared with a tightly gridded street network that typifies a walkable street grid. We do also require smaller local access streets with new development, but we generally don't need to show them on maps. These are approximate locations, and if you look closely, you may note that some are drawn over existing buildings, which could appear alarming. We are not planning to condemn anyone's buildings to make room for these streets. But if the property owners redevelop these sites, we want to ensure that these essential street connections are included in the redevelopment. I would also like to mention that any new streets that the city requires developers to build will also be built to the city's current standards. And that includes sidewalks on both sides of the street, buffers between the travel lanes and the sidewalks that include street trees, and bike facilities on larger streets. And those bike facilities will soon include enhanced bike lanes with the forthcoming updates to the engineering, design, and development standards. Street connections through this area will make it easier for people to walk, bike, and take transit to and through the area. It will help reduce congestion on the surrounding streets, and it will support transit operations. These next two slides have maps that show the projects in the area that we identified in the Transportation Master Plan. This slide shows the enhanced crosswalks and the safety projects. And those projects that are funded, that are on the 20-year list, rather, are highlighted in blue. That 20-year list was based on current funding, which may change, and those projects are included in all three of the alternatives being considered for this project. Another important detail that I would like to note is that we are often able to require master plan projects with new development, and we expect that will still be the case when this project is done. So on this map, the enhanced crosswalks are the red lines, and safety projects are the yellow squares. With enhanced crosswalks, we have a goal of having one every 300 feet. Most of these red lines are longer than that, so we would likely be needing to build more than one in many of these locations. The safety projects will enhance safety for everyone who uses the street, especially pedestrians and bicyclists. And this slide shows the roundabouts and the low-stress bike network projects that are planned in the area, with the 20-year projects, again, highlighted in blue. Among those, we have an enhanced bike lane planned for Capitol Mall Drive, for which the roundabouts in green are needed in order to reallocate space on the street. We do have enhanced bike lanes planned for Cooper Point and Black Lake Boulevard beyond the 20-year time horizon. For those to become a reality, we will need not only the planned roundabouts, but also a well-connected street grid in this area that will better distribute vehicle traffic and make it feasible to reallocate space on those streets. All of the projects within the Transportation Master Plan work in concert with and support this project's goals and strategies. So I'm going to turn this over to David to talk about the alternatives. I will be back to talk about the transportation details of the alternatives.
All right, we are on to the alternatives as listed in the draft, the draft environmental impact statement. There are three. The first one is the no action, so continue as is with current plans for the area, what the city has, and that was mentioned a minute ago about the transportation plans. The second one, the second alternative, is a moderate approach with some changes made by the city to help facilitate that vision for the area. And the third one is a more bold approach with the city doing quite a bit more to help facilitate that vision. And I do have a table here that explains this in a little bit more detail. So I'm gonna jump to a couple of the ones here that rose to the top of the public concern and the comments that we got from the community. First one is the height for the second line there, the height for it's called High Density Corridor 4. HDC 4 and HDC 3, both those zones, second and third lines. Start with the second line there, though. The proposal was potentially an alternative 2 to raise that to that height limit from, it varies a little bit between 60 and 75 feet, depending where you're at in the zone, but to raise it to 85 feet, which is about 8 floors. The more bold alternative would raise that substantially up to 14 floors potentially. We did get a lot of comments on that. Great feedback from people at all stages of this project, including all the way up until last week, which was the end of the comment period for the draft EIS. I will go over what we generally got on those, but I'll give you a hint here. The extreme height, 14 floors, was a concern for a lot of people, and our consultants even put in their earlier documents, such as the market analysis and the existing conditions report, and we've reiterated it to the public as well. that it isn't going to be feasible. It is very unlikely to be feasible to build a 14-floor building in the near to midterm. If things change substantially, you I'll stress that, may have a chance of seeing something like that near the end of the 20-year planning project time period. So the taller floor allowance there, the 14 floors, is really going to be a policy call eventually to figure out, is that something we want to allow even though we don't foresee it? It's not going to be very likely for a long time. Or do we want to wait until we have some demand for that and then address it at that time? One of the comments, not one, but several of the comments we got at the last public workshop on this was, if you're going to increase heights, maybe concentrate those in a central area, maybe do some exchanges for taller height. And I'll get into those in a little bit. So there's been some ideas about taller heights, but with some trade-offs as well. It's very much the same story with the high-density corridor 3, which is the next line. A little bit more moderate approach there with not quite as tall of a change. Much less increases in height in the next two zones. These next two zones represent only a minor portion of the sub-area. They're in the very northern portions. The vast majority of the sub-areas, the high-density corridor zones. I'm going to jump down to the residential parking. That was done on a separate tract and is already completed. When this project started, that was something of note, but it's already been taken care of. So on to the commercial parking. That has been identified as one of the issues with redevelopment out there. And I'll give an example. The mall is right at the limit where they can't take away any parking if they want to redevelop part of their site. So those parking standards were really appropriate in the past. It may be good to reconsider some of that if we want to see redevelopment in existing sites where some of the areas may be underutilized or unused part of the year. So that's something to take a look at and discuss further. Zone scale transitions, I did want to mention this one. There are requirements in the code when buildings are near the edges of zone districts from one high intensity to a lower intensity, and it deals with height and step backs and those kind of things. There is on number 2, alternative 2 and 3 here, there is some language about greater flexibility, and I wanted to give you an example of what that may mean. For example, if you're, I'm just going to pick a site that's near the Olive Garden, which is almost on the corner at Black Lake Boulevard. That arterial is a very wide arterial there. And the area across the street, there may be some room for flexibility in step backs and setbacks if you have a similar not a similar, but a more high intense use across the street and across a very wide street. So that's what it's talking about with flexibility. So it's not saying take away those things, it's just saying let's take a look at the exact situation and make sure it's flexible enough for all the kind of situations that may occur. Okay. We did get a lot of feedback on a lot of things, including parks, plazas, and gathering places. One of the components of a complete urban neighborhood is to have these. Alternative 2 mentioned that it would possibly be 3 areas to concentrate, 3 smaller areas to concentrate in the sub area. A lot of people preferred that. They weren't as supportive of having one larger area for that kind of use within the sub area. It's very specific here. It says a 0.5 acre park or gathering space in each hub. But people were more descriptive, and we've got a broader range of suggestions as to what that could be. Public plazas, performing areas, spray grounds, all sorts of ideas came from the public on what those could be. But they did want those eventually in the area. I will mention that the parks, the metric that the Parks Department uses for determining if an area is served by parks in the city does cover almost this entire area currently. But the consultant team, as well as some members of the public, thought as this area develops and you get more and more residents in the area, they're likely going to request more of an amenity in close proximity, as opposed to having to walk out of the sub-area to get to it. The sub-area is surrounded by a number of amenities, parks, Yager Park, there's, I think it's Sunrise Park to the north, and there are some to the east as well. All of those appear to be within half-mile walking distance. So the area is served, but as it develops, there may be some changes that need to be addressed. Green building, next one here. I do have some notes on that because that has come up a lot. There's been concern about that, people to support it, but with a reservation that it could end up being expensive. So they want to make sure that it's known what that would entail. We do have a couple things coming up in the future here, such as the new building code and energy code requirements. And I think the consultants, what they were getting at with these alternative 2 and alternative 3 with the above and beyond, were going to be very similar to what these new building and energy code requirements are. So there may be a little bit of a these were drafted early on in the process. They are still in here. And some of the things that, let's see. Some of the things that were mentioned, you could have incentives for green buildings, such as the consultants have thrown out a number of ideas. These are not set in stone by any means. These are just ideas that have been set out there. Green buildings, such as cross-laminated timber, passive buildings, things like that. And there could be incentives to provide those, as opposed to saying you must do those. Grid-connected appliances, individual metering for multifamily units for energy usage. Those are a number of the ideas that they threw out, maybe that's not the best term, the ideas that they presented as potential green development costs. Those are very hard to estimate. I did go through quite a few of the studies for the new energy code and the new building code. What I gleaned from those is that generally with green building, there is a return on investment in the long run. So there is cost savings in the long run, and there is more cost up front. It really depends on the development itself and what they're going to do to determine what that extra cost is. So it's very difficult on a broad scale to say how much more it would cost without more specifics. And those are the kind of things that we can figure out and get into more detail when we get towards the planned action ordinance as well. We can figure out more details at that point. One other thing on that, I'm sort of taking a little extra time on this one. Eco districts was mentioned. Those are special areas that do go through a form of certification process. The consultants have said what the city already requires, along with the new energy and building codes, really get you very close to what those eco districts would be. So there wasn't as much of a push to head towards eco districts for this specific area. Definitely something in the future to consider, but for this particular area, you're already quite a ways there with the incoming codes as well as what's already required by the city. Let's see. Tree code. There is a mention of this on the bottom of the page here about consideration of updating the tree code. That does not mean taking away any of the requirements for trees. I want to make that clear. We would not be reducing tree code requirements. What that does mean is the city is doing a tree canopy assessment right now. That will be, it's almost completed. Once that is completed, we'll have the necessary data to help with evaluating what urban forestry needs are, especially in this area, because it does cover this area. The tree canopy assessment does cover this area. So we'll be able to see what the area is lacking, if it is, which I think it may be. And we'll be able to move forward with what could we do to help this area get back to what it should be for tree canopy. This area also has a fairly high level of environmental health disparity, and that is related much of that is related to the lack of trees and tree canopy. Okay, I'm gonna move on here for you. On this last slide, I really just wanted to point out the The total housing units, and keep in mind, this is for the end of the 20-year planning period. It does say 2045, we're considering that 20-year roughly. Existing units out there would end up being about 761. Now there's two numbers here, 761 dwellings and 1,500 dwellings. It's just two different approaches. The consultants looked at the market trends and came up with the 761. Thurston Regional Planning Council has a different way of estimating potential future growth, and theirs was different. We wanted to make sure both those were in this plan and the EIS, so we did address both of those in more detail, and there's descriptions of why those are different in the plan and the EIS. Housing units would increase under Alternative 2, potentially up to about 1,900, and then Alternative 3, potentially around 3,200 dwelling units. Now keep in mind the zoning out there does not have a maximum density right now, and it has not for quite some time. We're not going to be increasing the density in the zoning code, the maximum density. There already is none. Okay, I will be moving on, and I'll be handing it back to Senior Planner Michelle Swanson to talk about the transportation portion.
Great, thanks, David. So I'll highlight some of the differences related to transportation under each of the alternatives. The first two lines on this table are the same for all of the alternatives. So they are to build the projects on the 20-year list in the Transportation Master Plan and to support intercity transit's efforts to explore a high-frequency transit route that would run along Harrison Avenue. We will also support a possible relocation of the transit hub if that becomes a priority for intercity transit. If Alternative 2 emerges as the preferred alternative, then we will encourage a transit hub near arterials, whereas if Alternative 3 emerges as preferred, we will encourage it in a more central location. Under Alternative 2, we will continue to require the same size block perimeters that we already do, but Alternative 3 will have smaller block sizes, and that will support a more tightly spaced street grid. To create more pedestrian-oriented streets in the area, under Alternative 2, we may add flexible Main Street requirements, whereas under Alternative 3, we would require them on Kenyon and 4th Avenue. And we would pair that with public investment, which is yet to be defined. Alternative 2 includes providing better pedestrian and bike access to 3 hubs in the triangle, and we assume that these would be built by private development with new projects. Alternative 3 includes an east-west multimodal improvement that links Cooper Point to Black Lake Boulevard. This is one of several items that could require public-private financing to achieve. And some may be wondering about the West Olympia Access Project. This is the 101 Interchanges project. We are slated to receive some funding from the state for design and right-of-way acquisition after 2029. And we expect construction will still be some time off from then. David will talk about community input.
Thank you. And I did want to be clear that when it is decided on which, we've asked the community which alternative they prefer, and it's not only 2 or only 3. It can be a mix and match of things, and that's what we got back. That's the input we got. Overall, the community did seem to prefer Alternative 3, but, and I capitalized that on the screen here, but they liked a lot of the items that were in Alternative 2 as well. For example, the building heights. The taller building heights people weren't really excited about those, but could be in the central core, might be a possible area for that, or maybe with some other trade-offs for those. Housing, people definitely wanted a mix and match, a mix of affordable housing and low income along with market rate housing. That was very important to not have it segregated, separated, that's a better term there, separated and put off in different areas. They want it mixed together to make it a more complete neighborhood. And it definitely, a lot of people did say, please put housing as soon as possible. We need it now. I already mentioned the smaller dispersed plazas and parks and open spaces as the area develops. Bus rapid transit on Harrison, that was supported. And then the green development requirements, but temper that with the potential costs for those. And I did talk about that a little bit in a previous slide there. So let's see. The timeline for this and what's going on with it. Right now, or in October, we had the comment period for the draft environmental impact statement and the preliminary sub-area plan, preliminary draft sub-area plan. The comment period did close for, the official comment period did close for the draft EIS at the end of the month. We did get, let's see, 60 written comments, and we got quite a few additional comments from the public meetings as well. We had 2 public meetings on that. I'll show you a list of the public participation opportunities we had. So November here into December, we'll be working on the preferred alternative. The consultants will be starting in on the final EIS drafting. And by January, we would like to have that final EIS back from the consultants for the city's review and the community review. Sub-area plan will be based on that. They'll be writing it concurrently. The draft was out now, but there were a lot of sections in there with red ink that said this will need to be finished once an alternative is chosen. The goal is to have the sub-area plan and the EIS done and reviewed by the community by the end of March. That's our plan at the moment. And then we will move into the planned action ordinance and any other development regulation changes that'll go into mid-2024. Okay, some of the public meetings, and I only put the public meetings up here. If you want to see all of the meetings, there was an attachment to this item that showed all of the community outreach that we've had for this project. The business focus meeting that was on the 12th of last month, that was well attended. We've gotten some very detailed insights into some of the local business owners' needs and wants for the area. Planning Commission briefing was on the 16th. We had 2 community meetings, both a week apart. We had one in the council chambers here, and there was online viewing as well. And then we had a very well attended one at the mall meeting room on the 25th. And the room was actually full there, and we got some great feedback from the community at that one. Briefing at Land Use and Environment Committee was on the 26th, and obviously tonight. There are a couple other ones coming up. The Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee is on the 15th. And the other ones that are in the other ones that occurred very recently, I did do the Lions Club. I did a briefing for them. They invited me. And then mid-next month, I'll be doing the Northwest Olympia Neighborhood Association as well. So there are a lot of other things going on besides the public ones that are listed on this page. Okay. This slide, I needed to change this, so I wanted to let you know this maybe I'll move off this one because this one should have been changed. Basically, this presentation for you was an overview of the project. We're not asking you for any action on this tonight. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer those as well as Michelle. So thank you very much.
Thank you, David and Michelle. I just want to point out the single-spaced 4 pages of community outreach starting in January of 2022, which kind of begs the question, when are we going to actually make a decision on what we're doing?
We're coming to the point where we're going to have intense review by the community, Planning Commission, and yourselves, culminating at the end of March. So as soon as we get that draft EIS back in mid-January, we'll be coming to meetings and getting your input and as well as your eventual decision on these.
Okay, well, nobody can say you did not do outreach on this. Wow. Anybody else? Questions? Councilmember Madrone, followed by Councilmember Payne.
Yeah, so David was and Michelle were both at the last land use committee meeting, and I just wanted to share some of the conversation that we had on it was, actually kind of resembled a lot of what you've heard from the community is preference for alternative 3, but with some sprinkles of alternative 2 in it. We did talk about building heights and some of the other aspects of it, which you've already heard, but I just wanted to share that with you all, that's what the Mayor Pro Tem and Councilmember Cooper and I discussed with David. And I want to appreciate the additional level of detail that you've provided in this presentation. It was helpful for me, and I'm sure helpful for the rest of the council as well, who doesn't dig into these things as much. And I'm wondering if you could, I'm curious if you could just kind of, as Brene Brown says, paint done for me. There's a few things where there are some, decisions to be made: building height, commercial parking. What does above and beyond green building standards mean? What are the specifics around that, tree code? And so, are all of those things going to be worked out before the final EIS done? Are they part of the planned action ordinance? And you mentioned additional touch points with council and other, planning commission and others before then. So I'm just kind of curious how we get there. Just because this isn't how we usually do those kinds of changes. Usually things would come through land use committee, come through planning commission, and there'd be a lot more touch points. But this is a different kind of process. So if you could just kind of talk about how we get to that final step. How many of these things are going to be figured out before then, and what it looks like for us to continue to weigh on it, because these are some big things.
Yes, much of those particular details won't necessarily be in the final EIS. More of the details will be worked out with the sub-area plan. That's where we can put a lot of the details. And the planned action ordinance, which will be the next several months. So that's really where the details will be nailed down, so to speak. And we'll get your guidance on what that should be after we get the final EIS back, and we have the draft sub-area plan back as well. So starting in mid-January is when we can really start to dig into that and figure out what exactly should be in these sections.
That's really helpful. And I'm particularly thinking about the green building standards, because how many meetings do we have around requirements for electric vehicle charging stations? And so I look forward to those conversations around what are those specific design standards for all of these things, but green building standards is just very broad. That could mean a lot of different things. So just wanted to get clear on what that process was looking forward, but that's the only question that I had.
All right. Oh, Leonard, did you have a response?
Thank you. For the record, Leonard Bauer, Community Planning Development Director. And I might just expand a little bit on what David answered there. This is a lot similar process to the downtown strategy. And for those of you who are here at the downtown strategy, we had a very, higher level review during the strategy itself. It had a whole lot of actions that we needed to follow up on, and that's kind of what we're looking at here. I think the sub-area plan, as David said, would have a little bit more in terms of the direction than you're seeing here. With the preferred alternative is really for that environmental review purpose. So it sort of builds an envelope and says, these are the things that we're going to allow in terms of the whole area, but it doesn't talk about how you're going to allow them. And then the sub-area plan starts getting into, okay, how do we want to do that? We want to have a tree code, for example, that has a little bit more flexibility at an individual parcel level so we can fit housing in. But overall, we still need to increase the canopy, and this is generally where we're headed with that. It's not till that planned action ordinance where we actually write that detail into the code and say this is exactly what the rules are that we apply to new development when it occurs. So there's really 3 levels that we're going through here, and each one will bring a greater level of detail. And of course, the sub-area plan and the planned action ordinance come to you for final adoption after a pretty thorough review by the Planning Commission and probably the Land Use Committee. So you'll have a lot of touch points there too. So just wanted to help expand on the answer there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I don't know how many of us, I wasn't on council for the downtown strategy, so I don't know, what were you, Lisa?
It was at the very end of it.
Yeah, okay, so just for that additional context, because it doesn't happen all the time around here.
True.
Okay, Councilmember Payne.
Yes, thank you, David and Michelle, both for your presentation tonight. I just wanted to bring up a few things based on some recent community engagement that I've done. And Leonard I appreciate you following up based on some of what I had heard. But I wanted to just mention a few things, or more like suggestions, based on that engagement that I heard. There is, you have here under Alternative 3 over 3,200 units of housing, which is great. But when we talk about our recent parking changes with our zero minimum parking standards and the potential of us looking at commercial spaces and amending that code as well, I would imagine that folks may have a hard time imagining that or envisioning that, especially when you're talking about increasing housing, but it sounds like you're talking about decreasing parking, which obviously, yes, we want to do that, but really what we're talking about more is making sure that there is a more walkable and bicycle-friendly triangle sub-area, but we want traffic to move safely and steadily as well. So it's not sort of in lieu of traffic, moving safely and steadily. And so it might make some folks nervous. And so I just encourage us to sort of think about numbers for parking when we're talking about units of housing as well. And presenting that and what we envision and what we're thinking about in that regard. And then also, the mayor pointed out all of the engagement that has been done thus far, which I believe you had, this list got much longer since we had our study session, which is great. But I just want to stress something that, we heard from our community work group with Reimagining Public Safety. So a lot of this engagement was done initially, which is great, but we need to go back and put a bow on it. So how do we, how have we taken the recommendations that each of these entities has shared with us, and are we going to do something with them, or are we not, and why? Because I think, based on what I heard is that this engagement is sort of like, oh, well, the city takes it, but I don't see what happens with it. And so I think we need to make sure that we're communicating where the city's vision and the communities comes together, and it works, and where does it not? And so I can't stress that enough to make sure that we, as we finalize the EIS and the plan, that folks feel like that the feedback they shared with us really played a part in this process, as it looks like it has thus far. Thanks.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem Gilman, followed by Councilmember Parsley.
Thank you, Mayor Selby. I also appreciate the expanded presentation tonight from what we received last week at Land Use. It is helpful because, as Danny said, it's super complex. It's been a long process. So I have a couple of thought questions I want to run by. The first is, recognizing that summarizing input is somewhat subjective. What I've understood or heard from community input and from the comments that have been collected in some ways is a little different than what we've been describing. The first is I heard a pretty strong message about do not subsidize private development in comments, and instead I saw in the summary reflected that there was a community desire for subsidies, including the multifamily tax exemption. So that's one place where I read the comments a little different. The focus on which requirements we can relax or what we'll allow, I'm wondering about where we memorialize what we dream of or what we'll require. And I'm thinking in particular about the early West Side, the Triangle Asset Generation Group and their work when they were meeting with you early on and talking about how do we foster a West Side town center, a senior center, library, post office. How do we make sure that those town center functions are in this redevelopment? So that's my first question is, where would that kind of desire, it seems analogous to me to the desire for a street grid, is a desire for community functions. And when I look at historic documents, there was room, school place, church place, you know, marked off as they were gridding a new town. How do we memorialize wanting those community institutions or that west side town center?
We did get a lot of input that said, we need a community center over here. It wasn't something that we were going to necessarily put in the plan to put the city on the hook for. It's something that we can definitely say, this needs further analysis and further community input before something like that is put into a plan. A lot of people did say the west side is like its own little portion of the city. It's different from the other portion of the city, and it is a little bit separated by the hill and a little bit by the water well, mostly by the water and the hill. So people did say they want community amenities, community assets in the area. There are some things in the area that are there already. There is a post office. It's not as prominent or as centrally located as it could be. It's in the southern portion. There is the most popular library in this whole area, not just the triangle, but the whole regional area here is in the mall. We have the library on our stakeholder work group, and that was the information they gave to me. So that's the busiest and most popular library. So that's another piece of the pie in regards to, I heard it once described as municipal furniture. You need a set. You need the love seat, the couch, and the recliner, among other things. So there are a number of things that would be very beneficial to have in an area. And Intercity Transit has said when they plan for the future of their services in that area, if they decide to move their transit hub to another location, there's a number of things they want to consider, such as they want it to be a destination point with community assets, such as plazas, libraries, community center. The mall is a big asset as well. So they will take into account those kind of things. But for this plan to actually specify where those should go without additional community input and your guidance, as well as you taking in the input from the community, we didn't go that far with these.
So that's an interest I have, is how we hold on to those, because I think while it's true that there's a library and a post office, those locations are both places that might be redeveloped, just as the West Side Center was, where the post office used to be at Harrison and Division, and they found a new spot. But leaving room for that civic furniture is real important. And then my other question, I was thinking about the 3,200 units that Councilmember Payne was saying, and that's about 5 times the number of units we've built downtown recently. Would all of those be eligible for the multifamily tax exemption?
I may have to defer to our director, Leonard Bauer, on the multifamily tax exemption questions.
Sure. That's fine.
Sure. Leonard Bauer again. Of course, as you know, the exemption itself in the areas, we'll be having a public hearing coming up in 1 week. So that'll be a decision that you will have in front of you actually before this plan gets to you. I think the envisioning from what we've seen from our consultant and their market study is that this area could benefit in terms of incentivizing more housing from that tool, but also that tool in this area that's the most likely area we have of the 3 that you'll be talking about next week that, or excuse me, there's other neighborhood centers as well. So I guess there's 7 areas you'll be looking at next week total. But of the larger areas, this is the one that is the closest to feasibility, I guess you would say, for development. And so it also has the opportunity to get to that mixed housing through the multifamily tax exemption as a tool, mixed income housing, where there could be an affordability requirement that could accompany that and be part of that program. that's a more feasible approach in this area than it is in some other areas of the city because of the rents that can be gained in that area. So from the market portion of that. In terms of what parts of the area, again, that's something that you'll be looking at ahead of time. It's, I believe, if I recall correctly, and I wish Jacinda was still here, she could probably confirm for me, but I believe that the proposal that you'll see next week is not the entire area that this Capitol Mall triangle shows, but it will encompass a large portion of it, but not the entire area is my recollection. So I hope that helps answer.
That's helpful. Thank you, Leonard.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
All right, unless we have Councilmember Parsley.
Thank you, both of you. And thank you, Councilmember Payne. I have often wondered when projects take a long time for a variety of reasons because they're complex, if we can find a way to tie a bow and bring it back to those that contributed to whatever that project is. I think that's super important because it makes people feel heard. I have two things. One, I'm sitting here listening to this and I'm thinking about a presentation I went to for the Livable Cities Conference, and it was in Portland, Oregon, and they were presenting a sub-area plan for downtown Portland. And they were going after the Coliseum and the stadium on the east side of the river. And they wanted to build in between. And it was a very scary thing to take away parking for two major venues. But they decided they were going to take some away and build housing in between. And it actually has started, and it will provide more housing in that part of town, which, by the way, destroyed one of the most diverse, most affluent African-American portions of Portland to build those stadiums. So they're trying to make amends by doing these, build in between the stadiums. And what they found is that the events for the Coliseum, people are actually getting on Max on the other side of Portland and taking mass transit to concerts and games and other things. So that goes to my first comment, and it also goes because I know of many East Side business owners who grouse about the parking requirements and that they're not matching to the businesses, and that they have a lot of lot or spaces open that they could either build on or provide additional housing. But because the city is requiring them to carry, in one case, 10 times more than they will ever see for customers in a day, we have a lot of parking lots sitting with no cars in it. It's impervious surface. It could be built on. You've got people interested in it. The last time I went to the mall, there was a ton of open spaces. So I'm pleased to hear that we're going to talk about that. And I'm not saying a blanket change on commercial, but I think we should be a little more cognizant and make it match with our standards for climate change, trying to get people out of the car, multimodal, and everything else. And I think this is a great space to start having that conversation. And I think you're going to find that if we match it to the type of business, that we'll find that people are going to be okay. There's downtown restaurants that don't have parking lots. The other thing I will say for residential parking, we as a city has said we cannot involve ourselves in market rate. If we are building, and this is a simple fact, if we are building market rate or higher housing, the builders are going to put in parking in that building or around it because they're going to attract the people that drive single occupancy cars. Most of the people that are AMI and below are either relying on mass transit, walking. There's a study in Seattle that shows in those types of housing developments, 50% or less of their occupants own a car. So we should be also watching that and making sure that we're not making an assumption that every residential thing has to have parking. We should match it to the type of housing, just like we should match our commercial to the type of business that we're talking about. My question is, and that Jacinda left, so this may not be appropriate for you all, but in our housing needs assessment, when Amy Buckler was here, and I remember this fantastic presentation saying, what the city needs to do is land banking, leverage our own properties to help stimulate affordable housing in areas of town. In the sub area, how much of that is ours? And is there going to be a parallel 20-year plan for us helping the affordable housing move forward with leveraging any of our own properties in that area?
The first part, what does the city own for property in the area?
Yeah, and then
Okay.
is that going to be included in some kind of affordable housing plan so that we can leverage property that we have to stimulate housing like we've done in so many other places, Boulevard, Franklin Street, so forth, Griswold's?
The city does own two small properties roughly in the middle of 4th that are on the north side of 4th Avenue, south of Harrison. Roughly in the same location as one of the maps you saw earlier showed the single planned future connection in the sub-area. That's roughly where these lots are. They don't connect, the lots do not extend all the way to connect both roads. And so those are the only lots the city owns that are not utilized. There is a stormwater facility that's being built on the other end, on the east end of 4th that the city owns. That's not buildable, not a buildable location for housing. So city ownership in the area is very limited at this point. As for addressing the housing, that is one of the things that we looked at was it's a citywide issue, so we weren't necessarily going to address it only for the sub-area. We didn't want to prevent or interfere with the citywide plans, which some of which do get specific on particular areas. But at this point, we didn't think that the sub-area plan would be the best place to address that, other than one of the things we did early on was identify that the multifamily tax exemption may be something to look at, but that was on a separate track. So this plan sort of backed off of that and said that's going on a separate approval track. It's not going to be necessarily part of this project. So I don't think I'm giving you an excellent answer, but there's very little property owned out there, and I think
our city manager has something to add.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there's what we own now and what the possibilities could be in the future for land banking opportunities. So like we do in the rest of the city and as part of our housing needs, we'll look for opportunities. If properties become available and we think they're good candidates for us to look at for future low-income housing, we certainly can be looking at acquisition and some land banking strategies around that. So I think there's some more work to do around that in the future, for sure.
And what fund do we have money to buy land with?
You know, we take advantage of lots of different opportunities, right? And so we have our economic development reserves as one opportunity to do that. We look at the opportunities through the Regional Housing Council and the funds that are pooled there to potentially look at buying properties that could be used for lower income, low AMI projects as well.
Thank you. Did I see Councilmember Drone's hand up?
We also just applied for that pro-housing grant that has some acquisition funds that are built into it. So, yeah, I would say look to the housing action plan in terms of the things that we would be doing in the sub-area plan, because those are the things we're working on throughout the city.
Thank you. I kind of go to, I picked up one of the comments and summaries that somebody in the community envisioned this sub-area triangle could become another downtown. And I'm intrigued by that, and I'm glad the community's even looking at that. So, we might have to goose this one a little more.
But we have to make a decision soon. Anyhow, Councilmember Madrone.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more thing. I wanted to really appreciate Mayor Pro Tem Gilman's comments around like the furniture aspect, those things that I actually end up spending a lot of time in the Triangle area because of the furniture that's there, post office, library, stuff like that. I've actually walked the whole area of the Capitol Mall Triangle just to see what these visions might look like, when you're walking around on the ground. And the one thing that we have a lot of control over when it comes to that furniture is the library. Like, it's our job to figure out where the library is going to be. And I know I've brought this up before with our CFP and everything, but that's something that we could do, is that community survey around like what does our community want and need for a library, not just for the aging downtown building, but also what do we want out of a library on the west side. And I would encourage us to keep thinking about that and how we might move that forward, because I think downtown the library is needing to be. Something needs to happen there, but on the west side too, like, I don't think that that's intended to be the permanent place, though we know we want a west side library, so we gotta be thinking about that.
I'll just tag on that. The fact that it's the highest trafficked library in the system and it's inside a mall, maybe we just need to expand the location inside the mall and make it. The trend on these larger facilities or to turn them into lifestyle centers. And so that could be the community downtown, could be inside the mall, and with the weather the way it is, it attracts a lot of, people all like 9 months out of the year.
You can walk your dog there.
Yeah, you can just walk, anyhow. But you know all this, and I think I'm gonna put a bow on this conversation. And thank you very much for your presentation. And we're gonna move on, I think, if that's all right. All right, thank you so much again, David and Michelle. We're going to go on to item 6B, which is consideration of transportation revenue for capital projects. And we're going to be led through that by our presenter, Sophie Stimson, who is a transportation director at the city. It's a transportation evening.
Lucky. Okay.
I didn't say traffic, I said transportation.
That's right.
Well, good evening, Mayor Selby and members of the council. I'm Sophie Stimson, Transportation Director in Public Works. This is an exciting time. I just have a few slides to go through with you. We've been talking about this quite a bit at the Finance Committee, but let's dig into the background to transportation revenues, our capital projects, our aspirations in the Transportation Master Plan, and a proposal that's on the table. Some background to this is that, as you know, every year the public reviews the Capital Facilities Plan. And in the last 2 years, there have been many comments about needing to see more progress building bicycle and pedestrian improvements. This year, the Finance Committee discussed how to more fully fund our Transportation Master Plan. And that master plan really emphasizes bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. So I'll describe a proposal tonight that could lead us to more revenues for transportation capital, and that would ultimately allow us to build the projects in the TMP, our Transportation Master Plan, more quickly. In 2021, we adopted the Transportation Master Plan with strong public support. The goal of the master plan is to increase the number of trips made by walking, biking, and transit. And to do that, we need to make those modes more safe, more accessible, more inviting, and we need to improve our streets. So these are the types of projects in the Transportation Master Plan, the ways we would improve our streets, and you'll see there's a real strong emphasis here on walking and biking. We were strategic about where improvements would be needed, and I think we've talked about this many times, but I just want to be clear, we're not saying that every street needs every type of improvement. There's a strong focus on our major streets. We look at the conditions of the streets and what it's like to walk and bike there and the destinations that people are trying to get to. We had a lot of methodologies that we spell out in the TMP. So while we were aspirational, we were also very reasonable and strategic. We identified what we called sort of the full network, and then we also scaled back and described a list of projects that we could afford in 20 years based on our current funding, our current revenue sources. And just to help make the link, the Transportation Master Plan, again, is just this broad look at all the improvements we'd like to build, and it's like the utilities, like the Parks Master Plan, it's a really nice way to feed directly into the CFP, so that every year when we build the CFP, we're drawing from the Transportation Master Plan. It's predictable for the public, and they can see why a project is a priority. So you've seen this before, but let's just look real quickly at the funding that we use to fund transportation capital, the Transportation Master Plan projects. These are the sources. There's 6 of them, and they roughly total about $6.5 million per year, although that can vary widely from one year to the next. Some of them depend on economic activity in our community. Some of them depend on grants, or grants are a major fluctuating factor in the pie. So I have a lot of tables tonight, so bear with me, but this is an explanation of that $6.5 million in revenue sources and what they can be spent on. So the general fund and REIT have quite a bit of flexibility. As you know, we can move those around. Grant project funding really just depends on what the project is for. So there's, I think we have received grants for a very wide range of projects. Grants have served us well in the last several years. But in terms of more restrictive funding sources, the voted utility tax is only for sidewalks and pathways. And to date, the Transportation Benefit District revenues have been directed towards street resurfacing. Impact fees have changed recently. They used to only be associated with vehicle capacity, but now we can spend them on a wider range of projects because there's recognition that other types of improvements for other modes actually add capacity to our streets as well. So impact fees can be spent while on a very specific set of projects, those projects are diverse. So now let's look at how much revenue typically goes to different types of projects. And the numbers I'm showing here are without grants, because that just kind of complicates the picture. And again, this is just typical. I'm just trying to paint a picture for you of what is the broader context of what money we get and how it usually gets spent. Because some of the sources are flexible, like I just mentioned, this picture could vary from one year to the next. So for example, in any given year when we're building the capital facilities plan, we may allocate some of those flexible funds where they're needed most. You'll also note that, on the left, you're seeing the different types of projects in the Transportation Master Plan, and there's a couple zeros next to enhanced bike lanes and safety projects. And that's because we didn't have a real history of ever building those projects until we got to the Transportation Master Plan and said, these are important parts of the types of improvements we want to build on our streets. So this is a good starting point for you to kind of see how funds are distributed to date. This table shows you the project needs that we have sort of summarized as a result of the Transportation Master Plan. So again, the same set of projects on the left. The far right column is the full ideal, what we want in terms of a really good network that's going to encourage walking, biking, and transit. And then the middle column is what we can afford in 20 years based on our current revenues. So you can see there's a pretty sizable gap between the last two columns, what we can afford and what our full sort of network vision is. And I'm going to stop and just remind you, we're not saying that every street needs every improvement. Like I said, we were very strategic about where these improvements would need to go. I'll just touch real quickly on enhanced bike lanes. When I did this, and I want to explain that this is really a rough estimation. I don't want to say that this wasn't even tied to project estimates. This was just the pace of construction, just to give you a sense of how much progress we could make with existing funding sources. And at the time, we didn't have any experience with enhanced bike lanes. So I can tell you how much we'd like to build, but I can't really tell you how many we think we can construct in 20 years. That's the level of estimating here. It's based on our past experiences. Similarly, we did not have a lot of history with safety projects, but since we've adopted the TMP, we've actually been successful with some grants. And so this is just a very rough estimate saying that we could probably build about around 23 projects in 20 years' time. But that would really be just if we were only relying on grants. So the whole point of this slide is really to show there's a big gap here in funding need. And when we adopted the Transportation Master Plan in 2021, you acknowledged that. This council acknowledged that this was the first time we'd ever had a master plan, and this is the first time we've ever been able to articulate what our needs are and correlate that to the funding. So the time is right to look into how we can make a bigger impact on building those projects. So let's move into discussing a potential new revenue source. The Council's Finance Committee discussed expanding the use of the Transportation Benefit District to raise revenue for capital projects. The TDB, as you know, is an independent taxing district created for funding transportation improvements. And our district is our city limits. Our TDB has been in place since 2009, and it currently generates about $1.5 million per year through the $40 vehicle licensing fees. To date, we have used those revenues for pavement management, meaning street resurfacing, but it can be used for other transportation funding needs. The TDB can generate revenues through a sales tax. Many Washington cities use both the vehicle license fees and the sales tax mechanism to raise revenues. A 0.1% sales tax could be collected through our TDB and implemented with council action. That would generate about $3.1 million in revenues that could be used for transportation capital. So here is a little more detail on the proposal we're thinking of with the 0.1% sales tax. This new revenue would allow us to increase the pace of TMP project construction to deliver more bike and pedestrian projects more quickly. And it's also an opportunity to add some funding towards projects that haven't had a typical funding source like we talked about. If approved, the new revenues would be reflected in the 2025 CFP. We're also proposing a new position be funded with these revenues, an engineer in the Public Works Department. This staff person is needed to increase our ability to scope and design projects, again, increasing our ability to build projects. So a little more specifically, in 2025, what we're thinking is that we could take these new revenues and allocate them towards 4 project types. Sidewalks being first and foremost, and I think you've heard quite a bit from the public about the need to fund both new sidewalk construction more quickly, but also to fund sidewalk repair. Enhanced crosswalks, we're proposing those because they really are such a crucial part of walkability. They're key to safety, they're key to helping people access bus stops, and they're really important for people who use mobility aids, having ADA access along our streets. And all of our enhanced crosswalks, Michelle talked about them actually earlier in the previous presentation, they're focused on our major streets. We're not talking about every street, but our big streets in the system. So the one I show in the photograph there in the middle is Pacific Avenue. And then enhanced bike lanes are, you can see an example in the upper right-hand corner that's basically a bike lane that's separated by a painted buffer or some sort of physical protection. It's protecting the cyclists from moving vehicle traffic. So as I pointed out, we have not had a dedicated funding source for enhanced bike lanes, but they're a new part of what we're planning for our street system. And so they're an important component to move forward with. Safety projects, as you've seen, have not had a dedicated funding source. I did describe how we've been very successful with grants here. The best example is on the left there, the bike and ped safety project we just finished at East Bay and State Avenue. We have another one planned for Plum and 4th. It shows how we've redesigned the intersection to protect bicyclists better and to protect pedestrians and shorten the crossing distance for pedestrians. And this all emerged because this was a location of the highest number of bicycle and pedestrian collisions in our city. So that's the type of project we're talking about when we say a safety project. This approach for 2025, these allocations towards these different types of projects, is really in the response to the public's comments and you indicating the need to fund bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. The majority of the transportation chapter in the CFP, it's important to point out, is largely bike and pedestrian work. So over time, we would like some flexibility to move to other types of bike and pedestrian projects in the CFP. These 4 are important right now, but as you saw, there's others such as pathways and bike corridors. So that's just something to consider, having that kind of flexibility. This is what it looks like when you add that suggested 4 allocations of projects into that table showing how projects are funded. So you can see there's the additional $1 million for sidewalks, $700,000 for enhanced crosswalks, and so on and so forth. We're hoping that, we can start with this in 2025, but as the CFP comes forward every year, we have some flexibility to adjust things, but to continue to fund bike and pedestrian projects. And again, the reminder that we would be funding the new engineer staff person out of this source of revenue. So this is the last slide, just to let you know that what we're asking for is if you support the sales tax proposal, staff will draft an ordinance for your consideration at the November 21st meeting. So that's my presentation, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Sophie. I'm sure we have some up here. Let's start. Councilmember Madrone, followed by Councilmember Parsley.
Sure, I'd love to start. First off, I'm really, really excited to see this. We all know that the Transportation Master Plan is extremely underfunded. And we also know that we've spent decades building a transportation network that caters to vehicles. And so this is an opportunity for us to fix some of the areas that are not really good for pedestrians and bicyclists in terms of streets that are dangerous to get around. I'm curious around integrating some of the ADA transition stuff into this work as well. And so my question, Sophie, is that, in the Finance Committee, we talked about really specifically wanting to dedicate this to bike ped projects. And with it as it's proposed right now, would that be what I understand it's 10 years if we vote to approve this. It would be in place for 10 years and then we would reconsider it then again?
Yeah, and we should just clarify that with Mark Barber. I think a sales tax of 0.3% for sure needed to be revisited after 10 years. Do you know if the 0.1% needed to be revisited after 10 years?
In response to that, council would have the opportunity to reimpose the tax at the end of the 10-year period, councilmanically.
Okay, so, but, and if we don't do that, then it would go away. So we would kind of have to do that if we want to keep, okay, just want to make sure. My hope is that for this 10-year period, that we can make sure that we're dedicating this funding to bicycle pedestrian projects. I understand wanting flexibility between the different categories, but I want to make sure that we're dedicating these funds to projects that don't have dedicated funding, and that wouldn't get done absent dedicated funding. And so is that what I'm hearing in your presentation right there? It's changed so much since it was in Finance Committee.
Yeah, if we could look at this slide one more time. I think the only thing that doesn't have dedicated funding is enhanced bike lanes and safety projects. But as I also said, REIT and general fund dollars we use very flexibly. So I can say they don't have dedicated funding at the point of adoption of the TMP because we didn't do those projects until we had a TMP. So, I think it's probably hard to say that a certain project has no dedicated funding source. We typically hadn't funded it, might be a better way of saying it. There is so much flexibility every year when we build the CFP that we can put general fund and REIT money towards projects like enhanced bike lanes and safety projects. So let's see, I think there was another part of your question. A lot of these projects you're seeing up here do have ADA improvements, sidewalks, pathways, enhanced crosswalks, roundabouts. All of those are going to include access ramps, upgrading access ramps. And I also want to point out that, if you took out resurfacing and roundabouts, all of those are bike ped projects. So really, a vast majority of our CFP is focused on bike and ped projects. So I'm not concerned that if we want to say that it should go for bike ped projects, that's not a problem. But it would be nice to be able to have the ability from one CFP to the next to say, maybe we need a little more for bike corridors this year in order to match a grant or in order to actually complete that project and not have to wait 2 more years to accumulate funds.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, having the flexibility for,
Right.
Maybe a little extra towards sidewalks one year because of an opportunity or towards enhanced bike lanes. I do want to just make sure that it's dedicated to, like I said, projects that wouldn't get done absent to this dedicated funding. Because I know that every time we redo a street, like we're doing Phones Road, like it's going to be a complete street. It's going to have sidewalks. It's going to have bike lanes. But that's just how we do projects moving forward. So what about the other areas that aren't going to get any attention if we don't have that dedicated source of funding? And that's what I mean when I say dedicated source. And when I reference the ADA transition plan, does the ADA transition plan and the TMP, do they talk to each other pretty well?
Yes, they do, and I may have to ask Michelle for some clarification, but, we were actually working on both of those plans roughly on the same time frame, and they have, when it comes to the access ramps and the accessible signals, there's a lot of consistency. Both of those plans are really relying on us getting work done through these other things. We may go out and do some very specific ramp upgrades as a standalone project, but by and large, we're relying on other projects to get a lot of our access ramps done.
Yeah, and I hope that we can figure out a way to move beyond that, because I know areas where the sidewalk might be in fine condition if you can get up onto it. And so we wouldn't get to doing an access ramp for that area for a very long time. And I know some that are near schools, that are near bus stops. And so I hope there's a way that we can integrate getting some ADA work that, again, might not get done absent a larger project into this funding as well, because it's just another plan we have that doesn't have enough funding behind it to make the kind of progress we really need to make.
Great.
I just want to tag on that, and then we'll go to Councilmember Parsley. Aren't we doing a $100,000 sidewalk study next year?
Yep.
Will that maybe include where we need those ramps?
Yeah, we will probably be able to collect that data. It'll be focused on the condition. It's a sidewalk condition assessment. So we'll be looking at where sidewalks need to be replaced. And it may make sense to also check in on our access ramps along that block face, although we do have a lot of really accurate data about access ramps already in GIS. So we know what's missing a ramp, we know where there is a ramp and it's not up to our standards, and we know where we have a ramp that's built to our standards. So we could verify it, but yeah, that's a good point.
So it's already integrated. Thank you. Councilmember Parsley, followed by Mayor Pro Tem Gilman.
As the chair of finance, I've been hearing about this for a while, but before I was the chair, I remember the first time I heard about the transportation master plan. See, I can say it right. And the estimate from staff was 100 years with our current funding. And to me, sitting there in 2021, thinking it was going to take us 100 years to achieve what the community really wanted us to do, has kind of kept that alive for me. And I'm going to give a shout out to Councilmember Cooper, because he was the first one to bring up the sales tax and potentially bringing this forward. And I appreciate that. And I'm also not going to ask you the question that I wrote you the email, because you answered it very well, which is, how would 3.1 million improve our 20-year plan outlook? Because as you said, a lot of these are estimates. This slide, when I look at it again, actually helps me understand. You're taking a zero and turning it into a 600,000 potentially. So I appreciate that. I also appreciate that the transportation master plan is going to, in itself, limit our spending on this money, because we've been mandated that we need to do that. And so I appreciate that you're going to need to have some flexibility. Also, to be able to do the master plan, we're going to have to just go forward. Now, one thing I would mention with the ADA, and this may come from having a mom who's in a wheelchair, it should almost be a lens in any CFB project, just like our equity, just like our climate. It should be, well, we're going to do some major project, or we're going to do something. How do we make sure this is compliant so that our money is double spent? I'm sure that's what you guys do. I just formalize it. It's a lens. Anytime we're spending money on this, we need to make sure it's accessible.
Yeah, and in fact, there's rules saying that we need to do that. So it's great. Michelle and I certainly appreciate that. Michelle's involved in looking at yearly progress on our ADA transition plan. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, just as a side note, the parking meters are too high for a person in a chair. But anyways, I, as chair, I'm very pleased with this, and I want to once again give a shout out to Councilmember Cooper for bringing this up and helping finance bring this forward. And as the chair, I wholeheartedly support it.
All right, I see Councilmember Cooper's up, but I've got Mayor Pro Tem Gilman, followed by Councilmember Payne, followed by Councilmember Nguyen. So then you can back clean up.
Okay. This feels like a real watershed moment to me, that being able to have some funds behind the transportation master plan's goals for active mobility is, I think, just so hugely significant, both for people who move on their own power by choice and people who move on their own power by necessity. It's really huge, and I appreciate the breakdown you just offered. I still have concern about the staff report offering that for next year we would have this breakdown and then we'd renegotiate each CFP. I believe that the call over the last couple of years, the discussion within council was about reaching these smaller projects and not helping to find the funds for corridor projects, not to discount the importance and the value of those corridor projects, but because we have a couple decades of planning commission and BPAC letters each year to the CFP saying, come on, is there any way to fund these things and get them moving? So for me, that's really important. So I want to recognize that it's both probably rationally the highest and best use, like to work on Martin Way Corridor, and it's probably the least popular way we could spend this money if we're asking the community to come up with $3 million more a year. So I would urge that we stay with the kind of allocation that you've described there, and if there is an opportunity that comes to leverage a local match for something, that you come and ask us, just as we've done with other funds. We've been, asked as a council, hey, can we change our priorities and reach out for this opportunity that came to us? That would be my preference, would be to hold on to these categories that we have, but rather than saying that we renegotiate every year, because frankly, the folks advocating for repairing sidewalks haven't really been winning in the last 20 years with that request each year in CFP land. So for me, it'd be really important to keep the $3 million or whatever it turns into as time goes along on those categories. And I think that the flexibility should be addressed by coming to council and asking to use the fund in a different way if an opportunity comes up.
All right, Councilmember Payne, followed by Councilmember Wen.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. You're sort of alluding to, what my question is about, which is about neighborhood sidewalks. So you said that obviously, it looks like we're designating or we're proposing funds for a variety of projects, including new sidewalk construction for major projects. But as the Mayor Pro Tem said, there are folks in the neighborhoods who have been advocating for, improvements to the conditions of their sidewalks as well. And as somebody who, just recently went trick-or-treating with my family and, and along with other unofficial duties about the city, I can tell you that there are certainly some needs, in our neighborhoods. And I know we're going to have the sidewalk assessment. So, I'm just curious about what does that look like for this, should we enact it, once we get the data from the assessment, and what does it mean for neighborhood sidewalks? Because presumably those folks would be also paying the tax that we would be imposing.
Yeah, good. So when we say that, I think we said $1 million of the funding would go towards sidewalks, and I distinguish that it's both new sidewalk construction as well as sidewalk repair. The new sidewalk construction is on a range of streets, and I have some maps if you're interested in seeing those. And then when it comes to sidewalk repair, we are going to do in this coming year, a series of sidewalk repair projects, and concurrent to that, do the sidewalk condition assessment, and then come back to you with the policy discussion about what is the city's role in terms of paying for sidewalk repair, because the current code says that it's the adjacent property owner's responsibility. We talked about that a little bit at land use this year. You asked to learn a little bit more, so we agreed to do the sidewalk assessment. We agreed to do 1 year of sidewalk repairs ourselves. Both things will give us more data about our problem with sidewalk conditions, and we'll come back to you and share those results and hopefully lead to a little more discussion around what is our our role specifically for sidewalk repair. So there is certainly some ability to pay for more sidewalk repair into the future, but I just want to remind you that there is a point where we need to stop and make the distinct decision, is this a role for the city, or are we going to enforce the code? So hopefully that makes sense. Yes, this funding could certainly go towards sidewalk repair.
Yes. Yes, thank you, Sophie. I do have an additional question. I believe it's I can't remember where we get the grants from, but I believe it's $11,000 in grants. So are we going to continue to get that money as well? And do we anticipate any increase anytime soon?
Yeah, that's a great question. When we did that pie chart that you saw in the very beginning, we were only getting around $1 million in grants per year. That was sort of the rough trend. But we've very gradually ramped up. We have great grant writers on our team. We've been very successful with grants since adopting the TMP. And the TMP has allowed us to forecast much better what projects we have out there and queue them up for grants more efficiently. It will fluctuate quite a bit. I could never tell you how many grants or how successful we'll be with grants from one year to the next, but we do our best. We have the Washington State Department of Transportation also very much emphasizes active transportation, bicycle and pedestrian projects. So we have been very successful bringing in grants, but things could change. Grant programs often change, so there's no predicting that. We will also do our best with the federal grants that we're seeing emerge, but I do want to just say those tend to be pretty large in scale and have very rigorous requirements. So I want to assure you that we will do everything possible to get those really large federal grants, but we really need to have large projects already designed and ready to be built. So we'll do our best.
All right, I'll just tag on that, since I'm not going to get my own time. I'm not going to give myself my own time. I'm going to take it right now. So, so I'm a broken record on this, that some of this money needs to be set aside for a sidewalk repair matching grant program for property owners. And part of that should be a toolkit that's available online that they can go on and go, this is what the specs are for a sidewalk on my street, and these are the range of approximate costs it would take, per foot to replace a sidewalk in front of their property. That way, they're not working blind. Right now, nobody has any idea what it costs to replace a sidewalk in front of their house. So that's my parting comments on this. All right, I got Councilmember Nguyen, followed by Councilmember Cooper.
Sophie, I think our first phone conversation was about sidewalks.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I had just started and I was like, everyone's asking about this, and what do we do? What's the plan?
Yeah.
I'm really excited about this one. The only thing that would make it better is if we didn't have to collect more money from people. But it's really, really momentous to have it here and have it before us tonight. I really, really want to thank you and other city staff for how much time and energy you've put into this. As much as we always think that, like, okay, we've said it over and over again, we've advocated for something, you all are the ones that kind of got to help figure it out. And that's a lot of work, and that's a lot of pressure that you feel living in this community too, right, and working here. So I really want to appreciate the work going into this, as well as acknowledge my council colleagues on Land Use Committee and then on the Finance Committee that have helped shape this and bring it before us tonight. I have heard tonight, other than just excitement and gratitude to be here, and also hopefully pass this tonight, is that I think we've had enough comments from individual council members, you can add me to it as well, that say, hey, we really like what you brought us. We really like the list of where the money is going. And I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Gilman that instead of looking at it as, okay, let's renegotiate every year, we can renegotiate if needed on where the funds are going to go when you bring it before council, right? Or having some sort of check-in. So what can we do, of course, depending on what the rest of the council thinks, what can we do to just, like, let's make that happen tonight? You know, how do we just, we take it from hearing it from enough colleagues to say, okay, when you bring it to us, the final version, can we just have that be the nudge to come back to council and not keep it, in flux? And I hope that is somewhat flattering to the work that's being done, is that we like what we have now. And we're nervous about losing it, right? And we also feel the pressure of I would say a lot of neighbors telling us about their sidewalk concerns. So I appreciate the conversation we've already had on it. Though for me, I think of not just in terms of neighborhood sidewalks where folks are, it's a heavy cost to repair the sidewalk in front of their house or next to their house. I'm thinking about the ones where the neighborhood groups that I've walked with that really want a new sidewalk. The East Side neighborhood would love a sidewalk that connects them and helps connects them to the new water park that's there, right, or the spray ground that's there. And they're nervous about a corner that they feel like is really narrow for when families or their children are walking to access that spray ground. I'm thinking about a walk that Councilmember Gilman, Councilmember and Mayor Pro Tem, I think it's fine. We took a walk, remember, it was a long one. We walked for a couple hours and you were showing me this like makeshift sidewalk sort of thing. And so I'm thinking about these ways that the community connects, within neighborhoods, maybe to park areas or communal areas that are not just repairing the sidewalk in front of their house. And I think that absolutely that is a city responsibility. So for what it's worth, thinking about the creation of new sidewalks as well. Really excited about this tonight. Thank you so much.
Great. All right, Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Selby. And I just want to echo all of the thanks that have been heard. The changes in this proposal since it came to committee are significant, and I think they really reflect the values of our community and what our community's been asking for, at least for my time on the city council, is really to move towards funding other modes of transportation than just cars. And so I'm enthusiastically excited. I agree with the Mayor Pro Tem. This is a landmark moment for the city. We've been working really hard to try and figure out how to more fully fund a more complete system. And I think one of the things around all this sidewalk conversation, that I'm excited about is having the assessment, because once we have the assessment, then we can look at where it's appropriate to repair. Because I don't think that we want to have a policy of just laying down concrete to lay down concrete because you have an address in the city. To Councilmember Nguyen's point, we should have through ways, like our bike corridors. We should have sidewalk corridors that help people get around the city and make those the priorities over everything else, in my opinion. And so I really look forward to that assessment informing that future work. And I agree 100% with the Mayor Pro Tem and Councilmember Nguyen that if we could be, if we could be more specific in the ordinance, that I think the council's intent is to use this funding as long as we can to fund modes other than automobiles. And so whether that's, for 5 years or as long as possible, that our policy intent is for this funding to not include automobile transportation, and that if there is any diversion or need for diversion from this, then the council would take that up on a case-by-case basis in real time rather than renegotiating every year. So I want to stop there and see, I'd love to make a motion, but I want to see if the intent of council to have the non-automotive contributions that are proposed here go on longer is enough for you to incorporate that into the ordinance, or if you need us to take sort of a separate action about that before we make an action asking for you to prepare the ordinance. Mayor, does that make sense?
Absolutely, and I've got a couple of council members and our city manager that want to make some comments. So
Okay.
I think I'll go to our city manager first, and then I'll do Councilmember Madrone and then Councilmember Partial.
And I'm gonna punt it right over to Mark Russell, because we were just having a side conversation here about this conversation.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. For the record, I'm Mark Russell, Public Works Director. Just want to assure the council and the community that we're hearing loud and clear, and we agree that this funding should go toward bike and pedestrian projects for all the reasons you've talked about tonight. So as far as staff is concerned, we're considering that to be your policy direction to us, that we will allocate the money the way you saw it on the chart tonight for bike and pedestrian projects. And I would suggest that if for some reason some project comes up, like Martin Way, I think I've talked to Mayor Pro Tem Gilman about this before, that we need, significant funding to do that project, because even though it has bike and ped facilities, it's not these smaller projects, it's a major corridor project, that we would come and draw that to your attention and ask for your approval. And most likely through the CFP project, we would come to you and say, in the 2028 CFP, for example, this is where the funding's going, but this year we need an extra $1 million to go toward a major reconstruction project because it's Martin Way and we need it for a grant match. So that's what I would suggest as far as from a staff perspective, is that we hear loud and clear your policy direction to us is to use this money for bike and pedestrian improvements. And then we would come to you if there's a project, more than likely through the CFP project, but if some grant opportunity, we could do it outside that as well if we needed to apply for a grant or what have you. That would be my recommendation on how we handle this. And in talking to our city attorney, Mark Barber, about the ordinance, it's my understanding we don't need to put that in the sales tax ordinance, that we can handle that in other ways, but I would certainly defer to our city attorney on how we have to word the ordinance with this direction. But
that's an accurate statement. The ordinance itself is broadly worded, incorporating the language from the Revised Code of Washington as to what the funds can be used for over a 10-year period. And that's because councils may change over that long term, and they may decide to change what they wish to use the funds for. However, besides the representation made by Mark Russell about coming to you for use of the funds, if you felt that you had to do this to make sure that staff did what you wanted, then that would not be the place where you would make that change to your code. Instead, you would do it to the Olympia Municipal Code, Title III, Chapter 4, Section 200, subsection capital I, subsection 3. And you may wonder, well, what's that about? Well, it's about uses of funds in the Transportation Benefit District Fund. And that's where you'd make it. Now, could that be changed by a future council? Yes, it could. But if you felt you needed to do that, that's what you would do. But you would not do it in the ordinance to impose this particular sales and use tax that's permitted by state law.
Can I just add a however in there? Sure. So if within the action you want to take tonight is to direct staff to both return the ordinances and to make sure it's dedicated in this way, then we'll have to bring you two different actions. So we'll bring you an action to impose, and then we could return at another time with another change to that other section that Mark is talking about as well. So I just wanted to highlight that as a distinction between those. And then the other thing that I wanted to highlight is really what Mark's saying is, you can also, we're taking that as staff policy direction at this moment in time. So you don't necessarily need to change the other section of the code at this moment in time either, right? We'll take it as policy direction. Put it in the code survives future staffs, right? That's what that does for you. So I just wanted to lay all that out for you.
Okay, I've got Councilmember Madrone, followed by Councilmember Parsley, and then we'll go back to Councilmember Cooper.
Yeah, it is my preference that we do incorporate that into code, and it's not a matter of distrust of anybody. It's just over time, councils change, staff change over, and I think what we're looking at is for the past several decades, we have favored one form of transportation over another. So we want to look forward to the next decade and kind of lock it in and say this is our commitment to equity in the transportation system. And by putting it into the code, it's not just a CFP shows up one day. I know there's a lot more work that goes behind it. I was just joking. But a CFP doesn't just come forward and things are different. It'd have to be a very intentional direction from the council to change that. And so I think that is our goal here. And I also want to make sure that whatever language it says, I heard what Councilmember Cooper said, like non-automotive. I also want to make sure we're not talking about the big projects that we now build differently, because Martin Way will need new sidewalks, but we want that to come as a complete street project and save these funds for repairing the areas that were built without the needs of other users in mind. So that's my hope and intention here. And yes, I would like to see that put into an ordinance.
All right, I've got Councilmember Parsley, followed by Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you, Councilmember Madrone. But clarifying and then I'm going to do my clarifying question. Are you talking code or ordinance when you say that?
But he just named the specific code.
Okay, so code. So I just want to make sure they're
Very
clear.
specific code.
Not
the
so
ordinance.
they're going to come back with the ordinance that Mark recommended, and then we're going to come back with a code.
Which would be changed through ordinance.
Yes, that is correct on.
Okay,
two ordinances.
There we go. Okay, I got it.
Two ordinances.
Okay, thank you. I'm all for this restriction, as long, and my clarifying question, as long as it's not exactly how you wrote it, meaning I would like to have it not be for streets. I also agree with Councilmember Madrone. The big projects, yeah, obviously you can come back to council for matching grant or whatever, but the council can approve that in a CFP or not. What I'm worried about is getting so prescriptive that it would have to be enhanced walkways, enhanced bike lanes, and ped safety. I would just say non-car travel so that it's focus on all of these things, because pathways could be finding a neighborhood walkway that is repairing and building out, sidewalks. So I want to make sure that we don't restrict that kind of shuffling within the bike and ped.
Great. All right, Councilmember Cooper, take us home.
Thank you, Mayor Selby. I want to add one thing because it hasn't been brought up, and that's that the people who live in Olympia have carried a heavy burden since the creation of CARS by having to fund the repair and maintenance of the roads that are used by people from 5 or more counties who come into our community to shop and do business. And so one of the things that this will do is allow us to collect some revenue from the visitors who come into our community. And I think that's a really good sharing of the responsibility as we look to create a complete system. Yes. So with that, I move to direct staff to draft an ordinance and the referenced municipal code amendments for city council consideration to impose a transportation benefit sales district sales tax. This would provide approximately $3.1 million in new revenues for transportation capital projects available for the 2025 CFP.
Second.
All right. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes unanimously. Thanks, everyone. That was a great.
I have a question. Do we need an additional motion for the other ordinance that we were
He
just
did,
talking
he
about?
said that.
He said,
Yeah.
oh, you got it all, okay.
He included it, yeah.
It's an and referenced municipal code amendments.
Oh, I missed that, but I voted for it.
Thank you. Uninformed voter. All right, getting a little punchy now because it's almost 3 hours in. We're going to do council reports, mayor's report. Just want to relay that Councilmember Cooper and I were in DC last week for a invitation for Washington and Oregon leaders to speak to the White House representatives on how we've been spending our federal dollars that we've received since ARPA, but also going into the Inflation Reduction Act and I'm blanking on the other one. But it was under this umbrella of Communities in Action. So they just really wanted to hear back from the local level, which was really nice. They wanted to hear from us, you know, because we're on the ground level of all this. So it was wonderful to be there with Councilmember Cooper. And we also met with our federal lobbyist, Rick Desimone, and had a really productive meeting with him. And then as well, I was able to squeeze in a meeting with Congresswoman Strickland to also kind of bring her up to speed on all things Olympia. So it was a productive few days. And we'll go to Councilmember Madrone.
All right, just a couple of things. Regional Housing Council, I won't say too much because I sent you all an email. We had a recent presentation on a survey of people who've received rental assistance. And we also, as a housing council, adopted a legislative agenda. So I've emailed all that information to you all. The Land Use and Environment Committee met towards the end of October. Let me tell you all about the Capitol Mall Triangle Sub-Area Plan. Just kidding. We also discussed zoning changes to address housing. And so, you know, we reviewed recent changes to our codes, but we also looked towards 2024 and what we're going to be working on. We will need to harmonize our middle housing policies with the decision at the court around our, you know, we have 2 middle housing policies in play here, plus some changes from the legislature. So we're going to need to sit down and sift through all of those and harmonize them. You know, a few, we're going to be very busy in land use next year, looking at a variety of things. We also were briefed on the status of the homeownership study. So we're working with some consultants to look at how we as a municipality can increase access to affordable homeownership. And that's going to be coming to us as a council, I think, before the end of the year, right? So I won't say too much now just because the hour is late, but I'm really excited about the intentional work that these consultants are doing for us to look at different ways and creative ways that we can create more access to home ownership in our community, especially for those who don't have that access right now.
All right, any questions for Councilmember Madrone? All right, Councilmember Payne.
Yes, just last week, City Manager Bernie and I attended the Association of Washington Cities luncheon for District 6. Happy to report that, and I'm sure it was in many ways intentional, but many of our priorities for our 2024 draft legislative agenda are in line with the AWC. Things like the property tax cap and mental health and behavioral health resources. There is one particular aspect, though, that I wanted to mention. We had our conversation around our draft legislative agenda proposal a few weeks ago. And one of the things that I thought was very important in what they mentioned is that if we could echo what AWC is advocating for in our own legislative agenda, that would be really fantastic and really helps them help us and we help all of ourselves with what it is that we're asking for from the legislature. So, for example, one of the things is they are very specific about tying the property tax cap ask to the fact that it should be tied to inflation and population growth. And so what they're asking for is for a new cap that will not exceed 3%. I think that's very precise and specific language, and I frankly am not opposed to having that same language in our draft agenda. So, Susan, I see you taking notes over there, but happy to engage in further discussion with other members of the council if you agree. But that's my suggestion, is to include that language as well.
Thank you, Councilmember Parsley. Has a
If I can
question.
figure out the button here. My question is, that sounds very similar to the language that was in the bill in front. Is that correct, in front of a legislature last year?
Yeah, I believe that is consistent with the bill language that got close to the end but didn't quite make it over the top. And just to reinforce Councilmember Payne's comments, AWC specifically was asking cities around this, because every city, just about every city in the state, I think, has this on their agenda, is there's power in us all asking for the same thing and not having a lot of different asks about the change in the property tax cap. So I also, would recommend that we mirror the language of AWC as the best chance to be successful, especially in a short session. And so I did bring the language back to Susan and provided it to her so she could take a look at, even in the mental health section, the things that they're asking for to make sure that to the best of our ability we're matching up. So, and you'll get a chance at this again, because Susan's going to bring the draft, the agenda back to you before the end of the year to take one more look at.
Thank you, and thank you. I agree.
Councilmember Madrone.
Could somebody send us the legislative agenda for AWC? I don't want us to agree to things from the dais when we don't have it in front of us.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't always agree with the AWC, so we might not want to adopt everything on their legislative agenda. We might have specific ways that we want to talk about mental health, stuff like that. Overall, with the property tax thing, yeah, totally.
Agreed, yes, it's kind of a menu that we could pick from, but not, carte blanche what is on their legislative agenda. All right, Mayor Pro Tem Gilman.
Jim's got his.
Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you. I just want to say I don't disagree with trying to be in harmony with the AWC. I'm actually quite surprised that this is on their agenda. That's a great sign. It has not been so in the past. I think as we work with our lobbyists and our own delegation, we need to make sure that the emergency clauses that are written into that law are practical. Right now we have a 1% cap, and in an emergency we can go up to 1%. And I think that it's important that we understand that we've had at least maybe 3 or 4 years in the last 15 that have been in the 5 to 7% range. And what would be our response or the state's desire in that kind of an anomaly year? And so that's just what I wanted to add into that conversation. Thank you.
All right, now on to Mayor Pro Tem Gilman.
Thanks. I'm really excited, and I'm glad that our Public Works Director, Mark Russell, came back in the room. I know he went out after a couple hours of being on the hot seat with the Transportation Planning Group for a group screen. So, but there's another amazing thing that just happened, and that is transit signal prioritization. Something that's been years in the making with intercity transit, working with Olympia, Lacey, and Thurston County to try to allow buses running on the Martin Way corridor to not have the same kind of turn the signal as a first responder vehicle has, but to be able to hold a green for a few seconds if they're close, both to get the bus through, continuing to move on schedule, but also to get the bus out of the way of the cars that are trying to get along the road there. So it's been huge, both technological coordination, political coordination, years in the making, and it's actually up and running. So if you see an extra long green light on Martin Way and a bus cruising through up to the next stop, that's what's happening. I'm very, very excited.
It's just a unique group where we geek out on stuff like that, isn't it? I'm with you, though. That's awesome. All right, Councilmember Parsley.
Are you saying we're all geeks?
Yeah.
Yes, we're all geeks. I'm proud of us. I have just JASCOM, and we've got some stats and then some information about what the future. According to them, and since they base their assessments on population, we have grown 3.77% since 2020, Thurston County. And that also affects the assessment to each of our jurisdictions. Overall, the statistics for the Joint Animal Service has been steady, except for in the last year, to go to the property tax comment by Councilmember Cooper, we are now having to pay 4.5% COLA for our staff, as well as we are leveling up all of the employees to be according to the average of the state and the national, so that they're making a living wage. The interesting thing, and this goes to, once again, Sarah Hawk, we actually had almost $600,000 in donation this last year, which is phenomenal. It's up from $190,000. And before Sarah Hawk, there was almost nothing, and we were running off reserves. This year, our assessment is a little bit over last year's because we did not hire 2 field service officers. And so it's not going to be quite the jump that we were going to get in the 3 to 4 year, removing ourselves from spending reserves. In terms of news, we did hire our group that's going to do the assessment for what it would take to be a up to code and up to standard animal care. We are hiring Animal Arts. They have done over 1,400 animal care projects, including shelters and clinics. They plan on a very robust public process, which we asked them for to get the input from the community. We also are about to start a governance study because we need to figure out, are we going to stay a government-run entity with assessment for the 4 largest jurisdictions, or are we going to splinter off and become a nonprofit with the jurisdictions paying contracts to the 501c3, which is common in many, many states. And it allows for better fundraising, matching grants, and a little more autonomy. We did bring in the Nisqually tribe is looking to contract with us, which is going to be an additional source of income for our Joint Animal Services. And I'll be interested to hear from my council mates on the governance as we work through it in the next year, provided I'm the representative. We also made some changes in how we hire field service officers because we've been having difficulty getting anyone to make it through our process. So because they are not commissioned officers anymore, they have the assistant or deputy chief might be able to tell me exactly what the commission is, but it's a limited commission and they are not going to be able to carry weapons. So we don't need to have the polygraph and a bunch of other requirements that a full commissioned officer would require, which will allow us hopefully to get more people through. And then I'm going to end with my favorite, which is the happy hour, which is Princess Betty Spaghetti Boop, which is a pit bull that's been in the shelter for 2 years because they could not place it because she could not be with any other dogs. But within 3 months of being in this household, she has earned sleeping on the son's bed, a space on the couch, and her own jar for treats.
Happy, happy, happy story. Councilmember Wen.
I will give a update or a little recap of our October 25th CLIPS committee meeting, and then I'll save anything else for next time. So on October 25th, we had our final committee meeting for the year. And in order to do so, we had many special meetings and late nights. So with that, we received a pretty in-depth creative district update. Really, really exciting. I know that we've heard the full council, a recap on the context of what is the creative district, where is it going, and it was great to have Mike Reed and Mary Grace Gaddu come and give us really in-depth, timeline with dollars attached. Who are we contracting with the Olympia Art Space Alliance, and what can we expect to see? And so just more fully realizing it. We also got I think quite a treat. Our first supplier diversity briefing that was from our city our city clerk, and then as well as a member of the procurement team. And this has been something that I've been looking forward to, and it's really the beginning of supplier diversity, or at least looking into how we're currently doing supplier diversity or business diversity for the city of Olympia. It's something that we're required to do federally, and we have done that. Although we're looking more fully into how we're spending money at the city of Olympia, and so certainly, we have all of these ways that we are trying to be more equitable. And how we spend our money, who we spend it with, is certainly part of that. Really excited about this. This one is really, staff are stretched thin right now, and our ambitions continue, right, on city council. But this one might have been something that had to wait until next year if it wasn't for passionate city staff that decided that, hey, you know what, let's see what we can at least do now, and bring that discussion forward. So that was really heartening to me, and just really impressive. So I hope at some point next year to be able to share that out more fully with all of you and get an update ourselves. We also, I'm trying to look for the things that are actually interesting to you. And then we also look to create our draft 2024 work plan. And some notable things, I think, we expanded the quarterly public safety updates to include, it always includes the police department, but to make sure we included code enforcement, so it wasn't somewhere else in the work plan for the year, but it was just with the public safety update, as well as this crisis response team, any updates there, and the fire department. So again, sometimes we'll get updates from them, but it's not that standing part of that public safety update each quarter, so that's really exciting. We could use more touch points with our full public safety suite of departments. I also think it's just great for morale as well, and to just understand what folks are doing. We also added, this is pretty exciting, we also added Parks Department sort of in general to the CLIPS work plan. We found this to be very in line with community livability when things come up like, what is that future pool, or it's called something else, aquatic center. Yeah, so what is the future aquatic center? How are we keeping our parks safe? And all of these things. And it's like, well, you know what? Parks should definitely be added. So we added that to the work plan. Hopefully the future stewards of the work plan will respect that. Also, we said farewell to committee member Selby, as this will be the final time that was the final time we had with her. And we did kind of round robins, and it was very popular to share well wishes to her that evening. But for what it's worth, I do want to note that she was always on time, she was always engaged, and as much as there's a little bit of light teasing with the full council for how she moves us along as the facilitator of our meetings, she stayed many late nights with us. She made time for special meetings, and then also, she'd be in Eastern time zone, and she would still Zoom in because this committee, gosh darn, it was so important to her. And then following along with those late nights and the many appointments that we do, or applicants that we review for our various advisory groups, always very respectful and always so encouraging and kind to the candidates, as well as sharing her institutional knowledge. So, as well, I would like to say, that's your little report card. Yes, and also, I just wanted to say thank you so much to my committee mates on community livability and public safety, and for staff. We always see Debbie there, Kelly's there too, and Mark, you're not forgotten. And Dawn, she's always there, but we can never see her, so she's probably listening now. Oh my gosh, did we dig in? We got things done, and boy, did we have fun. So thank you so much. This will be a tough one to top, I think, as far as my committee experiences. Thanks.
Thank you. That was very, very sweet. Unexpected, but much appreciated, so thank you. City manager. Oh, wait, I got Councilmember Cooper. I don't want to give you a big head, but you got a big head.
You should see it now when all of the screens on my screen are me.
Yeah.
Just really quick, I think people got an email about this, but last week, Thurston County was approved to join into what is now called the Pacific Salish Economic Development District, which is a work that the Thurston Economic Development Council has been doing to expand the economic development district that included Mason, Grace Harbor, and Pacific counties to include Thurston County. Thurston County and Yakima County were the only counties in the state that were not part of an economic development district. And an economic development district is largely focused on bringing large capital project funding to the district. And so it looks like there could be some great outcomes in the future as we figure out what it will look like having these 4 counties cooperate in an economic development strategy. That's what will come next. So it's been a lot of work for the EDC staff and consultant Jason Robertson. Mike Reed's been instrumental in this whole conversation. And I know everyone that went before me was a part of that conversation, Mayor Selby, Councilman Berhuen, and others. So just wanted to lift that up as a pretty huge accomplishment, some work in a larger region by our Economic Development Council. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Now, City Manager Jay Burney.
Thank you, Mayor Selby. 2 items for you tonight. The first is, I know we sent an email about this and we had some social media about it as well, but this is our first council meeting since we learned that we received a Governor Smart Community Awards for our work on visioning and concept planning around the Armory. So I just want to lift up our parks team and thank them for an amazing amount of work. When we acquired that building, we had all these great ideas and they're all starting to kind of come into focus and we're being recognized for that. So it's just a really proud moment, I think, for all of you up there and staff down here to finally be at this moment and being recognized for that. So I just want to lift that up. And then secondly, you received an email this afternoon from Finance Director Aaron B. Miller around adding some additional information to our preliminary budget document. So we added a new Appendix E to your budget document, which provides a more detailed comparative data by department around budgets as well as staffing, and it goes back, it's year by year. So this is something that we had committed to providing before we got to the second public hearing. So it actually matches the kind of information we typically put out in our preliminary budget. So it is out and available now online. So if you're a community member and you're searching for it, if you go to our website and you just search 2024 budget, it will take you to a page that has all that information. So just wanted to highlight that for the community members that I know were asking for it and looking for it. That's what I have for you.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question to that. So when we post the agenda on Granicus, will there be a link to that so they know, there's like under the public hearing, there's a link to that document?
Yeah, I'll talk to Susan. I think we can make that happen.
Yeah, I think that would make it very clear.
Yeah.
So when people, are making comments that in the past, right, the last time they were like, you don't have it complete. Well, now we do, and it should be linked.
Yeah, so Susan's nodding her head at me, so we'll make that change.
Thank you. All right. With no further business before the Olympia City Council, we're adjourned.